welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Curtis Rogers, who does such amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. We're going to chat with him about the dynamics of Big Ten play, what we've been seeing of some of those West Coast teams, a few teams that he thinks has a little bit of upside moving forward as well. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better, who's making it all the better to be able to dive in on some daily fantasy. It's very easy to get started because all you need to do is go to BETR.app. You type in the promo code of VSiNPod, that is VSINPOD, and it gets you $10 free to be able to get started. You just take a look at the board. You determine whether or not a player is going to go over or under their stat line, and that gets you all set up there. And additionally, where you have money lines and spreads in jurisdictions, a few select ones, you're able to dive in on those as well. So always a lot of fun there, and it is fun to take a look at what we're all getting in college basketball. Let's take a look at what we all got on Tuesday, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
We'll lead off with this team because they will enter the new year undefeated. Miami of Ohio as an underdog. They take down Bowling Green 93-83. An 11 of 23 3-point shooting percentage from Miami of Ohio as Antoine Woolfolk, Luke Sajic, hopefully I said that correct, Peter Suter, and Brent Byers. They all had between 14 and 17 points apiece. Very nice balanced effort out there. Win the rebound battle 34-28. They do turn the ball over 16 times. Bowling Green, one of the best teams in all of college basketball in terms of generating turnovers, but 22 of 24 at the free throw line. Shout out Miami of Ohio, who they find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done. And for Gonzaga, they have just one loss on their ledger. That was to Michigan, and we're going to talk about this team a little bit more in the next segment with our good friend Curtis Rogers over at 710 Seattle Sports. That's that for Gonzaga. Even though they get the win, it was tight against San Diego. 99-93 the finals. They got outscored, Gonzaga did, in the second half by a count of 56-51. For San Diego, you had a nice performance out of Tyler Johnson. He throws in there 21 points. And for Gonzaga, their bacon was saved because they had a trio of guys coming off the bench with big performances. Jalen Worley, 14 rebounds, 22 points, 5 assists. Ty and Grant Foster, 18 points, 5 boards. And then Mario St. Cypri was supreme with giving the team 14 points, and for Gonzaga, 8 of 18 from 3, but 13 out of 24 at the free throw line. So even though they got the win, a little bit sloppy there from the Bulldogs. No sloppiness from North Carolina. Don't quite get the cover on 14, but 79-66, they get the job done against Florida State, who went 12 of 40 from three-point range. Florida State very much embracing shooting a lot of threes. Chauncey Wiggins had 16 points, 10 rebounds to be able to get you the cover, but for North Carolina, they dominated the boards 47-37. They win the rebound battle with Caleb Wilson, Henry Vassar combined for 28 rebounds for Wilson, 22 points and 6 assists to go with Vassar. He threw in there 3 assists as well. Luka Bravich only 0 points, and he played 13 minutes in this game, so that was less than amazing. But Seth Trimbles coming off of injury, nice performance here. He had 20 big points. Big performance in the second half from Nebraska as they're able to take it to New Hampshire, 86-55 the final. And for Nebraska, they were nip and tuck in the first half. This closed in a lot of places right around 31-31 half. So you were able to most likely get the cover with New Hampshire. They were actually down only 41-38 at the half, and then in the second half got just line base at 45-17. And big reason why Nebraska had a big second half was Brandon Frager in the second half really going off. He had 15 total points, and then Price Sanford, he was able to do a nice job leading the way. He gave the team 19 points, and they win this game convincingly, despite the fact that they go just 5 of 23 from three-point range. San Diego State, they continue to play a little bit more up-tempo, 81-68. They're able to take it to old San Jose State, as for San Diego State, 6 of 11 from three-point range. BJ Davis off the bench was able to supply 18 points, and for San Diego State, 35-29. They win the rebound battle, so they were able to get a quality win and cover there. And for Louisville, no problems heading on out to the West Coast. They handle Cal 90-70, the final, as for Louisville, 14 of 37 from three-point range. Big performance here out of Ryan Conwell, 26 points, and they're currently dealing with the injury to Mikael Brown, but for Cal, they just weren't able to do a good job on the boards. They lose the rebound battle 50-31. They entered in this game one of the best defenses in all of college basketball, but Louisville was able to very much unravel that, so a quality win and cover for Louisville. For Tennessee, in a lot of places, they were laying 45-plus points against South Carolina State, and they cover that number. They win by 51, 105-54 the final, and man, this was not great from South Carolina State. They go 10 of 20 at the free throw line, so if you're wondering why they did not cover, that's a big reason why. For Tennessee, they only went 19 of 33 at the charity stripe themselves, but Jacoby Gillespie, he supplied the team with 21 points, 8 assists. For Tennessee, they actually play even up with the turnover battle, 10-10, but just absolutely nothing doing for South Carolina State from the floor. And for Tennessee, they shot 61% from the field, including over 66% from two-point range. I'm sure that some of you guys had this one with me. If you had the under in Vermont versus Princeton, game goes to overtime. Princeton, as a small underdog, they win by kind of 75-69 as they go 13 of 31 from three-point range, still dealing with an injury to their top two scorer to begin the season in Dalen Davis, so we'll see on that front, but that was one that got a little bit overwhelming for Wyoming. If you laid the number early, you got there with them. If you took the closing number, which was 12.5, it did not, so always want to be trying to get the best of it. 68-56, they hold down Air Force, and for Air Force, they go 1 of 12 from 3, and actually, sadly, won the turnover battle 20-19, sloppy Joe's sort of game, but for Wyoming, they were able to go 24 of 27 at the free throw line, 14 points, Nasir Meyer. So on some numbers, got the cover. On other numbers, they did not. Speaking of interesting covers, how about the way that Butler was able to close out their game, as they just barely get within the number against Creighton, 89-85 the final. And this was a second half where Butler won 50-45 in that second half. Creighton goes 13 of 32 from 3. They seem to be finding their offense, as Austin Schwartz has been the main catalyst for the team. Double figures in 5 out of the last 6 games, 22 big points out of him. And for Butler, they were able to get Yohan Traore going off the bench, 20 points, 7 rebounds for Butler. They did a solid job on glass, winning the rebound battle 42-35, but they were unable to just really defend inside, as for Butler, 31 of 75 from the floor, 31 out of 63 for Creighton. So Creighton does find a way out right, but the cover, that does go to Butler, and the cover goes to Fresno State, as they found a way to be able to slow down Utah State. They didn't get a lot going with their own shooting, but 72-63 as a double-figure underdog. Fresno State finds a way to be able to cover that, as they go 18 of 22 at the free throw line, just 5 of 22 from three-point range for Fresno State, 5 of 20 for Utah State, but Utah State did have on their side MJ Collins, who did a nice job supplying the team with 18 points. He went 0 of 4 from three-point range, but still found a way to be effective, and for Utah State, they do win that rebound battle by a count of 41-34, and this team was able to find a way to just hold them down. East Tennessee State, 74-49, all over the Citadel, looking like they're going to be in for a little bit of a rough year. And Northwestern, in a lot of cases, they were laying just over 20, just unable to get that cover against Howard. It was a sloppy first half. Northwestern was up just 31-28 at the half, looked better in the second half, but 80-60 the final. Northwestern had Nick Martinelli go off in this game, 32 points, 6 rebounds. Team goes 6 of 17 from 3, but for Howard, 8 of 22 from the outside, and one of the better mid-major players in all of college basketball, you're going to find Bryce Harris. He fouled out with only 4 points, so credit to Howard for being able to hold in there despite the fact that their main guy did not necessarily have the world's greatest day. For Miami of Ohio, they remain unbeaten, and Miami of Florida, they are not unbeaten, and they were unable to cover the spread against Pittsburgh, but they do find a way to not lose outright. Pittsburgh was up 43-33 at the half. Miami rallies to be able to get the outright win 76-69, but unable to cover that spread. As for Miami, just 4 of 22 from 3, but Malik Renew, he had a 2 of 5 3-point shooting performance, so the rest of the team was 2 of 17, 28 points. He goes 7 of 10 at the free throw line, supplied 8 rebounds, and for Miami, they did win that rebound battle 43-28, and for Pittsburgh, 9 of 17 at the free throw line. Not great, but Barry Dunning was able to get her Dunning 16 points, and you were able to get her Dunning if you took the points on that one, and if you had this under, man, this was just rough. Duquesne and Davidson were tied 69-69 at the end of regulation. You then have overtime, and then you have a double overtime, as this game was 75-75 going into double overtime. So even if you took the under, you were able to survive that first overtime, if I'm not mistaken, with regards to the total. Closed right around about 150.5, 151, but you couldn't survive double overtime. Duquesne 89-83 the final, so a few rough luck losses on some of these unders, but for Duquesne, 53-39, they do win the rebound battle, and Terrence Cunyer, 24 big points. He goes 5 of 12 from 3 to spark a Dukes team that went 16 out of 35 from 3-point range on this day, and on this AC null, they were able to lay it on Marquette, 79-73 the final. Marquette now 5-9 straight up this year. They go 8 of 27 from 3-point range. It's not a lot of help around Chase Ross, who had 15 points on 17 shots, and for the AC null team, they have been tremendous in terms of generating turnovers. Not so much on this day. They lose the turnover battle 13-8, but they dominated the boards 51-33. Seanall and Shaheen Allway just continuing to do more with less, and then we also did see Colorado State just have it absolutely handed to them at home by Nevada, 75-62 the final. Colorado State, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, but they've been shooting over 40% from 3, went just 6 of 24 from 3-point range. That was very costly, and for Nevada, Chuck Bailey was able to supply 15 points, but off the bench, Tyler Rolson, 21 points. That was able to spark the team, and you were able to get a spark if you were in on St. Mary's as well. 72-45 the final, as they really hold down Pepperdine, who went 4 of 23 from 3-point range. For St. Mary's, 10 of 10 at the free throw line, 6 of 17 from 3-point range. They were able to get a nice expose from Paulius Marsukis, who supplied 19 points. And then your slog of the night, well, we've got 2 of them. I'm currently doing this as Boise State versus New Mexico is going on. I have to have this up at midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern. Currently, as I do this, it's 38-33 with about 12 minutes remaining in the second half, so that's a slog, and we'll see if it matches the one that we saw between Notre Dame and Samford. Notre Dame on the road, 47-40, they get the win over Samford. There are some first halves that are higher scoring than this game, as for Samford, 4 of 30 from 3-point range. You had Chisholm Okpara throwing their 13 points, and he went 2 of 7 from 3. Rest of the team went 2 of 23 from the outside. Notre Dame wins the rebound battle 48-36. Still dealing with that injury to Marcus Burton, but you had Jalen Harrelson step up with 13 points for Notre Dame. They go just 8 of 14 at the free throw line, and they lost the turnover battle 12-6. But Samford was colder than an igloo on this night, and if you're looking trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball right now, has been a very interesting last 7 days in college basketball. Pretty much since Christmas, it's been 51 overs to 49 unders, so a little bit over 50% going to the over. Favorites on the spread, they're hitting at just below 48%, 47, 52, and 3 against the spread. And overall for the season, favorites hitting more around about 50.4%, 1,057, 1,043, and 37 against the spread. And it's about as even-Steven as it gets with regards to overs and unders. 1,056 overs, 1,057 unders, and if I'm not mistaken, about 22 pushes along the way. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at CBBAnalytics.com. That is CBBAnalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new new to VSiN? Well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Custom Gift Soups with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Curtis Rogers aboard. He does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, looking at so many different things, whether that be the Seattle Seahawks, who are having themselves an absolutely incredible year, whether that be the Washington Huskies, Gonzaga Bulldogs, Seattle Kraken, you name it, he does it. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at A Kid From Kent altogether. And Curtis, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, always happy to be on with you, and especially as college basketball gets back in action as the holiday break is over for most schools across the college basketball landscape. It's a lot of fun, and you know what? We learned in the last week, it doesn't matter what kind of eligibility you've exhausted, you can still play college basketball even if you're in the NBA. It's amazing. It makes no sense at all. So who knows? Maybe LeBron, who has 4 years of eligibility, he makes it his way back to college. So you learn something new every day.
If I'm not mistaken, Michael Jordan was a 3-year guy. He could return to college for a year as well. So, you know, it's some good fun there. And certainly it's very interesting to see what we're getting there. And how do you take a look at these teams that are bringing in some of these guys? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that are overestimating some of these G League guys, like Santa Clara. I know as a guy from the G League that's just currently riding their bench. And I know there's a lot of football around it. And James Donji, not your typical like scrub G League guy or anything like that. That's a former number 31 overall pick. So that's certainly an exception. But I do think that while there's a lot of outrage about these G League guys coming in, the impact is probably a lot less than what I think a lot of people are anticipating.
I agree with you there because, look, G Leaguers are not NBA players. They're a little more seasoned college players. I would kind of equate it to adding maybe a third or a fourth year guy in some instances, but there's a reason why they're not in the NBA is because they're just not NBA talents yet. Now, could they develop a little bit at the college level? Sure, absolutely. But it is not, I don't think it's necessarily, rubbing the magic lamp here and the genie is going to all of a sudden put your team in the Final Four. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case with any of these instances. Obviously, the James Najee one, that is the headline grabber because this is a guy who was an NBA draft pick already, was involved in the Karl-Anthony Towns trade that sent Karl-Anthony Towns to New York and sent Julius Randle back to Minnesota. So it's weird. It kind of blurs the line of what is eligibility right now in college basketball, who could possibly play at the collegiate level right now. But yeah, I'm kind of with you, Greg, where it is interesting when a team does add a player midseason because you just don't see it a lot in college basketball. But very rarely does a midseason addition automatically unlock things. I mean, I think back to Shaedon Sharpe with Kentucky. He never even appeared in a game, even though he was a midseason addition for them all those years ago. So a weird spot in a lot of these instances. But if you're a team that has a free roster spot, why not hand it out? It makes sense to fill it out with as many talented players as possible.
Yep, it's going to be interesting to see how these guys are going to be able to compete. And for Washington, I feel like they could maybe use one right now because they have been a mash unit with having Desmond Claude out the first few games of the season. Hans Steinbach has dealt with a little bit of injury. And now Wesley Yates is going to be out indefinitely as well. And how do you take a look at this Washington team heading into the meat of Big Ten play? Because we've already seen like 1 or 2 straight Big Ten games for a lot of these teams. But I feel like Washington is a team that has quite a bit of upside. But as we know, this Big Ten is just a very, very brutal conference in general. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how things shake out for them moving forward.
Yeah, they've had some pretty violent swings in their season this year. Some very competitive games, obviously taking UCLA down to the wire, beating a ranked USC team. But then for the second consecutive year, dropping it to Seattle U, that crosstown rivalry, becoming a lot more competitive. But look, Seattle U has had a really good season to start this year. They've been competitive in the WCC, so no knock against the Redhawks, but if you're Washington, that is a must-win game every single year, and it had been a gimme win for them for the longest time. So they dropped that one, bounced back with a nice win against the Toreros of San Diego. Interesting one against Utah, former Pac-12 matchup in the non-conference, but you look at the start of that Big Ten schedule, Greg, there is no break. There is no gimme in that one. They start at Assembly Hall with Indiana, then they go to Purdue. You've got Ohio State at home, number 2 Michigan, who a lot of people consider to be the best team in the country at home. Michigan State at home, at Nebraska. You've got your arch rival in Oregon, and then at Illinois. I mean, that is a brutal start to Big Ten play for the Huskies. And you mentioned Wesley Yates being out. That is not going to be easy. We're going to see Hannes Steinbeck play some pretty good, talented ball clubs here. That's going to be a big measuring stick for him and just kind of what his NBA value is going to be, because in my mind, he is one of the best players in the country, one of the most talented for sure. And I could see him easily being a lottery pick come NBA draft night, but you're going to see him get tested, and hopefully he can stay in the lineup because, you know, he's been in and out too with dealing with his own set of injuries. But yeah, that Husky lineup, looking at what they've got in store for them in the month of January, that is going to be very tough. If they make the NCAA tournament, they can point to their performance in January. If they can split those games, maybe win 2 of those games, I think they're going to be in a much better spot because things do ease up for them in the month of February. It's nowhere near what it is in January.
Yep, and it's going to be really interesting to see how things shake out moving forward for these guys. As joining me on the show, we do have Curtis Rogers, who does such amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. And just how do you take a look at, in general, what we're getting in the Big Ten? Because I do think that there's a divide between, I'm going to call it the big 3. Michigan State I'll throw in there, even though they've got a loss. Purdue has a loss, but I no shame in losing to Iowa State. And then obviously Michigan is Big Bad Wolf, currently the number 1 team in all of college basketball. But Illinois seems to be playing some good basketball. USC, you want to talk about banged up teams, they've been dealing with injuries, but they've only got 1 loss on their resume as well. Interesting teams like Wisconsin and company, and I think that it's going to be really fascinating to see what we get in the middle of the conference, which I'm sure is where Washington is hoping to be.
If you're Washington, if you can find yourself in the middle portion of that conference, I think you can impress the selection committee enough to get maybe one of those final at-large spots, especially considering the quality of talent at the top of the Big Ten this year. It's been really impressive just seeing all those teams at the very, very top, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, those 3 ball clubs, you could easily see them making a run to the Final Four. Nebraska, I'm calling it now, Greg. I think they win a game in the NCAA tournament.
Yes.
It's never happened before, so I think this year, 2026, we finally see Nebraska ball get it done. But yeah, I think if you're Washington, I don't think a realistic goal is to, win the conference or anything like that, but just get in that middle portion. We saw it last year with Oregon where they kind of got off to a slow start, but hey, they fought through that and ended up getting in the NCAA tournament. I still think that Washington has the talent on this roster to be an NCAA tournament team. Whether or not they can put it all together, whether or not Danny Sprinkle can press the right buttons to get this thing going in the right direction, remains to be seen. It's year 2, so I think expectations are a little bit higher for him and a little bit higher for his bunch. They're off to a better start this year than they were last year. And this is one of the best starts the Huskies have gotten off to in recent years. So, maybe there's some magic there. But I look at Washington right now, just get in that middle portion of the Big Ten, get into a spot where you can maybe win a game or 2 in the Big Ten tournament. Obviously, you don't want to be one of those teams left out of the Big Ten tournament because then there's just no opportunity for you. I mean, you look at their arch rival Oregon right now off to a really shaky start, 7-6, 0-2 in conference play. You can really leave them in the dust there by picking up a victory over them coming up here in the month of January.
Yes, absolutely, man. It's been rough for Oregon State right now, and I do think that WCC, which we were alluding to a little bit before, is going to be a fascinating conference because we both know Gonzaga very, very clear favorites in that conference. Lone team that they've lost to thus far is Michigan, and well, you don't want to lose by as many points as they lost to in that Michigan game. Certainly no shame in losing to Michigan, and then St. Mary's is looking like that clear number 2, but got a little bit of a scare from Loyola Marymount a few days ago, and I think that middle of the WCC is going to be interesting because I think that there could be a case for maybe a third team to be able to make the NCAA tournament if they are able to get hot, like a team like San Francisco just knocked off Seattle is very intriguing. I just mentioned Loyola Marymount, what they're able to do, Santa Clara. I think that it's a really interesting middle out there in the WCC, and I'm going to be fascinated to see which team separates themselves from the rest.
Yeah, you can definitely see a bid thief maybe of one of those teams that could finish third or fourth in the WCC, especially if they were to knock off, say, St. Mary in the conference tournament. But the WCC is in a good spot in the final year of what this version of the WCC looks like. I think Santa Clara, they have had a really respectable run as of late in the WCC, obviously putting a lot of really good players in the NBA. Jalen Williams, Brandon Podjemski, those two guys have been, mainstays in their lineups. And the Dons of San Francisco, I mean, they've been producing great coach after great coach. They've been producing a lot of wins as well. I hope that there is a third bid out of the WCC this year. Do I expect it? Probably not right now. Just kind of based off the lay of the land and how they've entered West Coast Conference play, your only opportunity now to get quality wins in your conference is to really try and beat Gonzaga, try and beat St. Mary's. Easier said than done, much easier said than done. As you pointed out, the only team to beat Gonzaga right now is a team that a lot of people consider to be the best in the country in the Michigan Wolverines. So it's going to be tough sledding for teams not named Gonzaga, not named St. Mary's, but yeah, I think you can't take any breaks in the WCC this year. I think that is a good feather to have in your cap for a conference like that, and especially teams like San Francisco, teams like Loyola Marymount, Pacific, all those teams right now, sort of in that middle tier of the WCC. They're going to make things, I think, a little bit more interesting than it has in years past.
Yep, I think that it's going to be fun to be taking a look at these teams, and I do think that it's going to be a good conference landscape in general, as we do have our good friend Curtis Rogers over at 710 Seattle Sports joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly there's a lot of teams out there in the Pacific Northwest that are interesting. You're going to be having your eye on the Big Ten, but is there just a team or two nationally that you want to watch the next few weeks because either they had a really good or bad start to the season, and you think that there might be a reversal to the positive or the negative for them?
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity there for a lot of good teams to kind of right the ship. I look at right now Kansas as a team. I wouldn't say that they are in a bad spot at 10-3, having won 4 straight, but they have not really gotten much out of Darren Peterson, who a lot of people consider to be the number one prospect in the country. I mean, he has been in and out of the lineup, only played 4 games this year. Who knows what kind of availability he's going to have? Could potentially be kind of like a Kyrie Irving situation. They're, maybe not wanting to ruin his pro prospects. But, hey, I think Kansas is a good team. If they get Peterson back, watch out. I think their ceiling becomes much higher.
Anyone who gets a Peterson is in great shape.
Exactly. You can say hi to Darren at the Peterson family reunion coming up at the end of the year. Yeah, I think them. I think Texas Tech, those are 2 ball clubs right now that, they've got obviously great head coaching. I think Grant McCasland is one of the most underrated head coaches in the entire country. Bill Self is Bill Self. We don't need to dive into that. And you look at Texas Tech, their only losses have been to a good Illinois team, blown out by Purdue, but that was just a weird set of circumstances for that 30-point drubbing. Then they lost to Arkansas. So they haven't lost to many bad teams, and I think that is an important thing to remember heading into conference play and heading into when teams sort of solidify their resumes is like there's no bad losses, which means that they, I would say, are firmly a good team. Now, Texas Tech currently ranked 15th in the AP poll. They're getting the respect of the voters. They have a pretty decent start to Big 10 or Big 12 play, I should say. Oklahoma State, that should be a W. Tough one at Houston. Really, I mean, outside of Baylor, Houston, Kansas, Arizona, they don't play Iowa State until February 28th. That's a nice little break in their schedule because, I mean, Iowa State right now, one of the best teams in the country. So I think the Jayhawks, I think the Red Raiders, I think both those teams are teams that I would definitely be watching. Now, obviously, Kansas, we don't know anything about Darren Peterson and his availabilities, but I think if he does come back in any way, shape, or form, the Jayhawks obviously are a team that I would not want to see on my side of the bracket.
No doubt about it. And with Kansas, you know that Bill Self knows how to be able to navigate his way to not just a NCAA tournament Final Four, but to a title. He's done that a few times. And if they can get old Peterson back, which I feel like, again, everyone could use one, that is going to be big for them, just like it's big to be able to get you on this podcast. Curtis, you're doing such an amazing job looking at this great game of college basketball, really everything happening out there in the Pacific Northwest. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, we've got our finger on the pulse here. Huskies, Cougs, Zags. Red Hawks, Eastern Washington too. It's a fun time to be up here in the Pacific Northwest, especially with hoop season. And also, we've got the number one prospect in high school basketball too up here, Tyron Stokes. It's fun to keep tabs on his high school career over at Rainier Beach. So it's always fun to see the local talent shine like that. But yeah, you can check it out, seattlesports.com, Seattle Sports, the YouTube page, where you can download all sorts of content. We're trying to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're closer. We're like at 49,900. So to be one of the 100 to click subscribe, you'll enjoy your time there. You'll get to see my precious little mug occasionally. But yeah, and Greg, always appreciate hopping on with you, and hope you have a very, very, very productive new year. Happy to hop on with you in 2025, and I look forward to talking to you again in 26.
Absolutely. Curtis is one of the best in the business. It's always great to be able to get him aboard. He makes us all smarter every single time he does so. So a big thanks to Curtis for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. Here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Curtis Rogers, who does such an excellent job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and really covers everything out there in the Pacific Northwest. Every single time he joins me, lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks, Curtis, for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @GUnit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving bigger conferences up top, and then these games are going to be at the bottom. Games involving the Southland, the Patriot League, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Big South, the Northeast Conference, the America East as well. I believe that I've got them all. So how about if we get things started? This is 659, 660 on the card. NC State plays us to Wake Forest. Wake Forest is an underdog of 9.5 points. So on this game, it is 160.5, and I do like the under. I did set a total of a 158.5, as for Wake Forest, they have been very good at generating turnovers. In a road/shoot record environment, this has been a top 15 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're really good in terms of not allowing a lot of good shots from three-point range as well. Teams are only shooting about 28.5% from three-point range against them in a road/shoot record environment. That is a top 35 mark in all of college basketball, and I do think that for NC State, with them being a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three, and this has been a good three-point shooting team. They are a top 25 team with regards to their overall three-point shooting percentage at 39%, but I do think that that's going to be a little bit of a botherance to them, so I'm willing to take those points. Juke Harris has been able to step up in a big way for Wake Forest. He's been their main man, averaging in the neighborhood about 20 points per game. Wake Forest last year was just dreadful with their three-point shooting, and they're not amazing this year, but they're more around country average at 33.5%. Harris, he shoots 34% from three to go with those 19.9 points, 7 boards, and throws in there a steal and a half per contest. And for Wake Forest, there's great balance with this defense, as each of their top 5 scorers and 6 out of their top 7 scorers all give you at least 1 steal per game. So they're doing a nice job on the defensive side of things of being able to generate those turnovers. For Wake Forest, they've been a solid rebounding team, a top 125 team with that regard. Trayvon Spillers has added a little bit of versatility, 12.5 points, 5.5 boards, a little bit over a steal, and a block and a half per contest. Cooper Schwieger's been a little bit of a disappointment, but you've had Mekhi Mason be able to step up with about 8.5 points per game. They do a nice job by committee on that front end. For Will Wade, he's getting into his team when they're up 30 to 35 points, but this has been a relatively untested team here over the last few weeks. They have been able to get great production out of Darion Williams, 15 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists, Satchid Sufran. Each of your top 5 scorers for NC State shoot at least 41.4% from three. I think that is going to be doing for a little bit of regression, and NC State really not giving themselves a lot of second and third chances there. Outside the top 225 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Now, top 85 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage, and they've been forcing things to the outside. They're a top 40 team in terms of inducing teams into shooting it from three, and they're about a country average team in terms of guarding the three at 32.5%. I think that's enough for this Wake Forest team to remain lively. NC State, to their credit, they've been a top 100 team as well in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so do think that those turnovers lead to the under, so I total 158.5. 9.5. And with Wake Forest, set them as just a 4.5 point dog. So getting 9.5, I'm taking those points. 661, 662 on the card. It is Mercer, and they're on the road against Furman. And Furman finds themselves as a mid-tier favorite of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 153.5 is the total. And I'm going to be willing to take the points with Mercer. I only set them as a 1.5 point underdog. Now for Mercer, the big thing is they've got to do a better job on the defensive glass. As this is a team that, with regards to percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they have been a bottom 30 team in all of college basketball. They're allowing opponents to grab well over 36% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, but have a Furman team that is down with their offense. They're only about 147th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And to the credit of Furman, they're doing a pretty solid job not allowing a lot of second and third chances, especially at home. Teams are only grabbing 20.6% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and that does lead me to the under here. I did set my total more in that 145.5 neighborhood, so getting 150 plus, I do like that, as Furman has been playing relatively slow and controlled this year. 244th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, in year number 2 under Ryan Ritter, Mercer has cranked up their tempo just a little bit. They're up to about 127th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that Mercer is going to be able to do a good job of holding in there, as Brody Shoulders has done a rock solid job being able to give this team something down low. 8.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Baraka Okoji, not going to really go bombs away from three, but he supplied 17.5 points, 5.5 assists, a little bit of a steal per contest, and with this Mercer team, they have been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you've had Armani Mighty live up to his name, be very mighty with about 2 blocks per contest, so I've been liking what he's been able to bring to the table as well. And then on the Furman side of things, they just lost their top scorers from a season ago, and that has really been killing them for this Furman team. You know that you're going to be able to get some relatively good production out of the big men. You've got Cooper Bowser back from a season ago, supplying 13.5 points, pair of assists, 6.5 rebounds per game, along Charles Johnson, who is able to shoot it from 3 at 6'11", but only shooting about 29% from 3, 10 points, a steal, 9.5 rebounds out of him. Alex Wilkins, the freshman, has had to really step up with about 17 points per game. And you do have Asa Thomas, who's able to shoot 40.5% from 3. He's pretty much the only out of their top 8 scorers that does shoot above 33.5% from 3-point. Colin O'Neill has actually shot 54% from 3, but he's been in and out of the lineup due to injury. We have not seen him in darn near a month, so that does not really help out this team. And I do think that Furman is going to be able to do a relatively okay job in terms of not allowing a lot of clean looks from 3 themselves. They've been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage and not allowing a lot of second chances. So I do think that you get a little bit of an underwhelming game. Semi-total 145.5. I do like that under end, with Mercer made them just a 1.5 point favorite, so taking those points. 663, 664 on the card. It is Tulane, and they are on the road facing off against East Carolina. East Carolina is a 1.5 point home underdog. 144.5 is the total. Did set a total of a 146.5. I do like the over. East Carolina seems to be improving a little bit with their 3-point shooting. I mean, they have still been one of the most brutal teams with regards to both guarding the perimeter and shooting it from the perimeter in all of college basketball the last few years. And right now they are allowing teams to shoot 34.5% from 3. So the 3-point shooting defense is getting a little bit better. 3-point shooting offense has actually gotten worse. They're dead last in the country. 24.4% from 3 out of 365 teams. That is 365th. You have one guy on the roster shooting above 30.4% from 3. That would be Vito Perkovic. He's been able to give you 3.7 points per game and shoots 35.3% from 3. Everyone else, 30.4% or lower. Now, this team is going to be able to dominate down low. Giovanni Amaruju, 9.5 boards, 14 points per game. Jordan Riley, stat sheet stuff for 21 points, 2 steals, pair of assists, 5 rebounds per game, but 28% 3-point shooter. Just not great on that front. This is a team that's looking to pile drive the ball down low. They're a top 55 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. They're also outside the top 330 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Now, for this Tulane team, they are not going to generate any sort of second and third chances whatsoever. They are averaging 8 offensive rebounds per game. That is a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball, and they live and die by the 3. And right now, they're shooting 29.5% from 3. I have to think that there's going to be a little bit of positivity there, and they've got the best scoring guard in this game. That'd be Rome Brumbuff. 18.5 points from 3-point range. He's shooting 37.5% from 3, 4.5 boards, 3.3 assists, a little bit over 2 steals per game. And then Curtis Williams, he shoots more like 32% from 3 with 13.5 points, 5 boards, but this team does not generate those second and third chances. Now, to the credit of Tulane, they've been a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and you do have an East Carolina team that has been doing a very brutal job in terms of being able to maximize their possessions as well. For East Carolina, they're well outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, so that makes things all the worse worst with that regard. As a matter of fact, for East Carolina, they are right now clocking in 274th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but this is a Tulane team that really doesn't force the issue there. Tulane, a relatively country average team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're going to lose that battle down low, but with East Carolina just not being able to do a good job from the perimeter, I think that Scotty Middleton will get it going a little bit more for this Tulane team as well. He and Tyler Ringgold are combining for about 9 rebounds, 2 blocks per contest. Between the two of them, you're getting about 15.5 points per game. I do think that they find a way to get the job done. It's a Tulane team that's well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Tulane playing very slowly this year, about 275th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. East Carolina, more of a mid-tempo team at 168th, but do think that this is close enough for late game felling. Set at 12, 146.5, like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to a deuce here with Tulane, 665, 666 on the card. It is Loyola Chicago, and they're going to be on the road against Rhode Island, and Rhode Island does find themselves as a pretty sizable favorite here. You're going to be laying with them 10.5 to 11.5 points. 146.5 is the total. I set a total here of a 139.5. I do like the under. Loyola Chicago has been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, 354th, and this is a Rhode Island team that's not necessarily looking to gun it themselves, 304th in the country with that regard. And for Loyola Chicago, they just have not been able to do a great job in terms of executing on offense, and for Rhode Island, 282nd in terms of their own ball security. So I think that overall sloppiness is going to be able to cost you an over in this spot. And for Rhode Island, you've been able to get good production out of Jonah Hinton. He's hitting it harder with 15.5 points, shooting about 34.5% from 3-point. Jamari Tripp has been a 40% 3-point shooter with about 12 points per game. And then Tyler Cochran, he's a stat sheet stuffer, 12 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, 3 steals. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3 as Rhode Island. They only shoot about 31.5% from the outside, but top 100 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. And what Rhode Island has been able to do a very good job of is generating turnovers. They're a top 55 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Loyola Chicago, they are a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So Rhode Island going to be able to get nice clean possessions for Loyola Chicago. They're just not getting it going from anywhere. In terms of their free throw shooting, 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages, they're all outside the top 225 in every one of those categories. Now, they are getting Xavier Amos back, who's been able to supply about 14.5 points per game, was a nice double-figure score over at Northern Illinois a few years ago, just did nothing when he was over at Wisconsin for that year. And you still have Miles Rubin down low, give you 2.5 blocks, 11 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. He's solid down low, but it's not going to give you any stretchability. DeWilk Tavares has been able to shoot 37% from 3 with about 11 points per game, but I mean, it certainly has been rough for this Loyola Chicago team, and it is a Loyola Chicago team that just really has been bad with regards to their defense. Typically, this team does a nice job in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances on the glass as well. While they're not going to create a lot of second and third chances for themselves, they really cut off other teams with that regard. But this year, Loyola Chicago 275th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. That has been very much less than savory. Meanwhile, it's a Rhode Island group that they themselves are about 255th with this regard. So both teams are going to be able to get some second and third chances, but I do think that the overall sloppiness in this game is going to cause you, and for Loyola Chicago, just really growing pains all across the boulevard. I set my line at 13.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 139.5. 667, 668 on the board. It is South Alabama, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Louisiana. Louisiana is a home underdog of 3 to 3.5 points. So on this game, it is 126.5. I'm actually going to take a shot on the over at this number. I set mine at a 127.5. So it's just very much the number getting a little bit too low, as both of these teams playing quite slow and controlled. For Louisiana, bottom 20 team in terms of total possessions per game. South Alabama more around about 268th, and South Alabama is just daring you to shoot from 3. 60.6% of opponents' field goal attempts come from 3-point range. That is by far number 1 in all of college basketball, but I like what this team has been able to get out of Adam Olson along with Chaz Harris. These two guys have been able to combine for 33 points per game. Harris doesn't really give you any 3-point shooting, but 4.8 boards, 4.8 assists, a steal and a half per contest. He's a 6'6", a little bit of a point forward. And then for Olson, he's been able to shoot 39% from 3. They are dealing with an injury to Peyton Law, who's been a double-figure scorer for them, but they've got plenty of guys that are able to step up, as J.J. Weed and Randy Brady played good minutes last year, and they've seen a reduction with that regard, but now they're starting to get back in the fold and give you a little bit more. For South Alabama, they really don't give themselves a lot of second and third chances, and where they have been getting killed is on the defensive glass. They are outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but no cheapies with them. They are allowing the fewest free throw attempts per game of any team in all of college basketball, and this has been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you have a Louisiana team that is outside the top 330 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. A relatively respectable rebounding team, but I mean, they're still dealing with Jamarian Keller, the transfer from Oklahoma Oklahoma State deal with an injury. He had 34 points in the first 2 games of the season and has not been seen since then. Dorian Finster, Jackson Oliveira have had to pick up the slack. They both give you 12.6 points per game, a combined 9.5 rebounds per game, and nobody else on the roster gives you more than 7 points per contest. With Louisiana, they're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, outside the top 340 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, and they shoot 30.5% from 3, outside the top 300 with that regard. I just don't know what Louisiana is really doing well. Good news is they should be able to find a little bit in terms of the second and third chances that they get on the offensive boards, but I do think that South Alabama going to be able to take it to a Louisiana defense that is outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, as well, and is really not forcing the issue in terms of generating turnovers. So set a total of a 127.5. I'm willing to take the over at 127 or less. If South Alabama made them the 9.5 point favorite, I'm going to be willing to lay that number. 669, 670 on the card. Florida Atlantic is playing us to UT San Antonio. Meep the Roadrunners are a 15.5 point underdog. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total, and set a total of 154.5. I do like the over. For UTSA, they've actually slowed themselves down a little bit from past years. Austin Clonch's teams typically like to play very much up-tempo. They're about 93rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Florida Atlantic just 165th in terms of total possessions per game, but we've seen their total possessions per game increase by about 6 possessions per game over the last 3 games. So this is a team that under John Jacobs, you figured that they were going to be looking to run, and it feels like they're starting to find that swagger. Now, Cannon Carlisle can sometimes shoot you in and out of a game. 14.5 points, 3 assists per game, but right now he's shooting 28% from 3-point range. He's been dealing with a little bit of injury, but should be good to go here. We saw him in his last game against Central Florida, but I mean, the way that Devin Williams has been able to really manhandle things down low, 5 boards, 3 blocks, 8 points per game, and Devin Vanderpool has been your main scorer. 16.5 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists per game. That's rock solid. Where this team is very vulnerable is 3-point shooting defense. They're back outside the top 275 for a second straight year with that regard, but this is also a Florida Atlantic team that is a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And for UTSA, everything is right now flowing through Jameer Simpson. He is the lone double-figure scorer on the roster. 18.8 points, 5 boards, 2 assists. He shoots 38% from 3. Team as a whole shoots 29.3% from the outside. I think that that's doing for a little bit of positivity. And to the credit of UT San Antonio, they're a top 80 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but also not generating the same amount of turnovers that they have in the past. They're outside the top 200 now in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You do have a Florida Atlantic team that has been a little bit suspect on defense, 194th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. By UTSA, they are down to about 244th with that regard. UTSA is doing actually a relatively solid job of giving themselves second chances. They're a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. So both they and their opponents are grabbing a lot of second and third chances. You've got Caden Rayfield for UTSA giving you about 6.5 boards, 8.5 points per game, and then you've gotten 5 boards out of Babakar Njai, who's been able to throw in there about 6.5 points per game, but he also racks up the fouls, and this is a UTSA team that is very much going to be putting you on the free throw line, top 75 team in terms of free throws allowed on a per possession basis. So I do think that you're going to get plenty of second chances here with UTSA being outside the top 300 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages. I just don't think that they shoot well enough in this game, and Florida Atlantic I do think is going to be able to find some holes in this UTSA team to go bombs away from 3. Semi-total 154.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 18 here with the Owls of Florida Atlantic. 671, 672 on the card. It is Wofford, and they are going to be on the road against Western Carolina. Wofford find themselves as a very slim road favorite of 1 to 1.5 points on this game. It is 152.5 to 153.5, and I like the under a semi-total at a 149.5. You've got a Wofford team that, with the offseason coaching change, have become a little bit more of a mid-tempo team. 240th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They were significantly slower a season ago. Western Carolina back to being a very up-tempo team. 44th in terms of total possessions per game, but if you look at their home games, they play significantly slower. They're a country average team with regards to total possessions per game at home, and Western Carolina has had a very difficult time in terms of taking care of the ball, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, outside the top 325 with that regard, but they go up against a Wofford team that's really not forcing the issue themselves. With Wofford, they are 303rd in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. The Wofford defense leaving something to be desired, 256th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and you have a Western Carolina team that's been able to do a very nice job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. At home, only about 21% of opponents' missed shots result in an offensive rebound, top 55 mark in the country, with having Marcus Kell doing a bit of everything. 13.5 points, 5 boards, doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, and Western Carolina is only shooting 30.5% from 3-point range, and they themselves have been getting barbecued from 3. They're allowing teams to shoot 38% from 3-point range, Jet is outside the top 340 in all of college basketball, but you've been able to get good production out of court. Stansbury, 11.5 points, 2.5 assists. He's been able to give you about a steal per contest as well. CJ Highland has been in and out of the lineup. That's been hurting them, but it seems like there's a chance that he's going to be able to be good to go in this game. He's been their main three-point shooter at over 50%, which is certainly going to be seeing some regression. And then with this Wofford unit, they've been able to get good production out of the Central Florida transfer in Niles Malkowski, who's been supplying about 13 points, 4.5 boards, but only shoots 26.5% from three. And Wofford also only shoots about 31.5% from three. So you got two teams outside the top 275 with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. Both teams are outside the top 240 with their three-point shooting percentage defense. And then you've got a Wofford team that just really doesn't force the issue with regards to generating turnovers. To their credit, this Wofford team has been pretty solid at taking care of the ball. Top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, with Kamari Holmes doing a nice job leading things, 17.5 points, 6 boards, 2.5 steals per contest. But Caden Bosco shooting just 24% from three is a little bit of an issue. And I do think that Western Carolina going to do a nice job not allowing a lot of second and third chances, which allows them to get the job done. Set my line at a 149.5 with this total, and on the under end, maybe Western Carolina 3.5 point favorite, so I'd like them on the money line. 673, 674 on the card. George Mason is on the road against LaSalle. LaSalle is exploring a cover as a home underdog of 7 to 7.5 points. 137.5 to 138 is the total, and with George Mason, I set them as a 12.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This George Mason team is 65th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, down a little bit from last year, but also 40th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and you've been able to get good production out of Jahari Long and Corey Mincy. These two guys have been able to combine for a little bit over 30 points per game. They're both shooting 44+% from three, and George Mason as a whole, they're shooting 37% from three. That's a top 75 mark in all of college basketball, but they're also doing a nice job with regards to defensive prowess as well. They've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and that's big because LaSalle just has not been able to shoot it well from three-point range. LaSalle is currently about 305th in the nation in three-point shooting percentage at approximately 30% against Division I opponents. They're outside the top 290 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they're turning the ball over 14 times per game. That's an issue when you're outside the top 310 in terms of total possessions per game. George Mason playing slowly as well, 290th in terms of total possessions per game. And for this LaSalle team, out of your entire roster, you've got one guy shooting above 32% per three, Eric Acker, 36.5% three-point shooter, 8 points per game, and only one double-figure scorer. That'd be Jaden Marshall, who's been able to supply about 13 points per game. They've dealt with some injuries with Jerome Brewer's come over from East Texas A&M. We haven't seen him here in the month of December, so that's been a big issue. That's been their number 2 scorer and one of their better rebounders, Josiah Harris, so it's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. And this is a LaSalle team that, while they're not doing a great job on the glass or better on the glass rather than they are from the perimeter, but the overall turnovers, the overall sloppiness, and the way that George Mason is able to pound teams into oblivion with their defense, I do think is going to be able to win out in this spot. George Mason, even though they don't necessarily have that one guy that's going to give you a supreme amount of rebounds, they've had Riley Allenpatch give you 6.5 rebounds per game. Emmanuel Kenga off the bench gives you about 5 boards. They should be able to get the job done in a low possession slog. I set my line at a 130.5 with the total. Like the under and a modal A, George Mason made them a 12.5 point favorite. 675, 676 on the card. Appalachian State is on the road against Old Dominion, and Old Dominion finds themselves as a 2 to 2.5 point favorite. 137.5 is the total, and made my total a 134. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got an Old Dominion team that is slow, but not like super slow. They're about 175th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and I think that they dial that back moving forward. Appalachian State is really stinking slow. 349th in the country with this regard, and if you look at the raw points allowed on a per possession basis numbers for Appalachian State, they're not eye-popping. They're about 158th, but this has been a defense that has been getting better and better as the season goes along for this Appalachian State team. They have now allowed 70 points or fewer in 5 out of their last 6 games, so they've been able to come along for the ride after having a little bit of a rough start to the season. So I'm going to be willing to take the points. I did set my line at a 2 for Old Dominion. Last year, this was one of the best offensive rebounding teams in all of college basketball. They're now outside the top 280 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in offensive rebound, even with bringing back the 7-footer and Caleb Swann-Roger, blocking half, 7 points, 5 rebounds per game. He's been pretty solid. And then you had Jordan Battle give you a bit of everything, 13 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists. He shoots about 41% from 3, but Robert Davis, who was a 15-point per game scorer for the team last year, he's out with injury and just has not been effective. 8.5 points. He's shooting less than 30% from 3. Casey Shaw's out with injury, but he's been able to give you 16 points when he's been out there as well. But on the flip side, for his Appalachian State team, they've been able to get a lot out of Kassan Jennings, who's come over from South Florida. He's right now shooting over 41% from 3, 15.5 points per game. And for Appalachian State, they do a nice job taking care of the ball. Top 80 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now they're outside the top 285 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, are in the top 110 in both of those categories. categories. They've been allowing a few too many opportunities on the glass, so you've only got one guy on the roster that gives you over 4.6 rebounds per game. That'd be Luke Wilson, no relation to the actor from Old School. 10.6 rebounds, block and half per contest. He's been able to do a pretty rock solid job there. And then Alonzo Dodd, 12.5 points, 4.5 boards, a little bit over 3 assists per game. So I've been liking what I've been seeing there with them. And for Old Dominion, this has been a team that's been suspect with their defense, who are in 61st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But at home, they are giving up about 21.2 points fewer per 100 possessions, so they have been much better when they have been in their friendly confines. But with this Old Dominion team, with their just inability to really give you much inside, I don't think that they're going to exploit the fact that Appalachian State is giving up a lot of second and third chances. So semi-total 134, I'm in on the under end with Appalachian State at 2.5 plus. I'm going to take those points. 677, 678 on the card. Charleston is on the road against Elon, and Elon is a slim favorite here. You're going to be laying with them about 2.5 points. So last game, 155.5 to a 156, and I set a total of a 156. So 155.5 or less, I'm in on the over. Charleston, they are still playing relatively slowly, 251st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but they've been getting healthier, and as they're getting healthier and healthier, they're starting to crank up the tempo more and more, as getting back Connor Hickman has been very big. He was a 15-plus point per game scorer over at Bradley 2 years ago, just dealt with injury last year, along with this year as well. But when he's been out there, he's been able to give the team 13-plus points per contest for a Charleston team that still is really lackluster with their three-point shooting. Overall, if you combine their Division I and non-Division I games, they're shooting 27.7% from three. That is a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. Jalen Counter has been able to shoot 37.5% from three. He's supplying 15.5 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, steal per contest. He's been very good, but among their top 5 scorers, he is the only one that is shooting above 32% from three. Now, good news for Charleston, and this has been factored in. Kobe Duggan, a 15-point per game scorer over at Campbell last year. He made his season debut a few days ago. He had 10 points in that first game back, so that helps out. And then you do have a 7-footer, Christian Reeves, who comes over from Clemson, 8.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. But even with having that 7-footer, this is a Charleston team that's outside the top 145 in terms of their overall rebound percentage. And for Elon, you've been able to just get supreme production out of the Fort Wayne transfer and Chandler Cuthrell, 21.5 points, 6.5 boards. He only shoots about 32.5% from three, but team as a whole, they shoot about 35.5% from three. Top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball. And this is an Elon team that all of a sudden has been able to generate for themselves second and third chances. And for Elon, they are going to give up some second and third chances themselves. They are about 246th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but in terms of percentage of their own shots that resulted in offensive rebound, Elon has now become number 17 in the country, rebounding 37.5% of their missed shots. With Charleston, they're more around about 160th, and Kapper Klonzich has been a big reason why. He was a starter over at St. Joe's way back in the day, 13.6 boards, 3 assists, good versatility at 6'6" right now, shooting 50% from three. Should see a little bit of regression there, and this is an Elon team that is lackadaisical with regards to their defense. They are outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They're a pedestrian team in terms of generating turnovers, so I do think that Charleston going to find a little swagger on offense, 155.5 or less. I'm in on the over, but with Elon, I just think that they execute offensively. I'm willing to make them an 8-point favorite. I'm willing to lay that number. 679, 680 on the card. It is Virginia Tech, and they're playing also Virginia. Virginia is a 4.5-point road favorite. 153.5 to 154.5 is the total, and I made Virginia the 5.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with them. For Virginia Tech, just a big issue for this team is the fact that Toby Lual has been missing for darn near a month, and he was averaging a double-double when he went down with an injury, and we have not seen him over the last now 7 games. Now, Nicolas Avadeus along with Marnie Hansberry, these guys are going to be all good to go, and they've been very good for this team. A combined 31 points per game. Avadeus is a 6'8" point guard who's supplying 5 assists, throwing in their 37% 3-point shooting, and both of these guys give you nearly a block per contest as well. Hansberry, he's been able to give you 8.5 boards. He doles out a little bit over 3 assists per game as well. And Jaden Shuett has been, as a 6th man, able to shoot 45% from 3-point range. Just come on very strong. Double figures in 4 out of the last 5 games, so I like his overall production. And for Virginia, this is not a team that's really going to be looking to push tempo whatsoever. For Virginia, in terms of total possessions per game, they're 287. So while it's faster than what they have been in the past, they're certainly not playing at warp speed. You've got a Virginia Tech team that has been playing a little bit faster this year. They're up to about 127th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but Virginia actually number 2 in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And for Virginia, much of it is because they've been a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Nearly 14.5 offensive rebounds per game. Thaddeus DeRitter, along with John and Grunlow, have been the big reason why. With Grunlow, 2.5 blocks, 9 boards, 7 rebounds per game. And then you've been able to have DeRitter supply 16 points, 6 rebounds. He actually shoots 44% from 3. And Virginia as a whole, they're shooting 39.5% from three-point range. That's a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. They're 10 turnovers per game. That's a top 50 mark in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're locking things down low. They've been a top 50 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. They'll give up a little bit more from the outside, and this is a Virginia Tech team that's also a top 100 team in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage. To the credit of Virginia Tech, teams are only shooting about 29.8% from distance against them, but they're very vulnerable on the inside. Virginia Tech, very good at taking care of the ball, top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, so they get some nice clean offense here. Set Virginia as a 5.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with them. Made my total a 153.5. Seeing a lot of 153.5 out there. I'm seeing that one straight 153, and personally, I would rather have a 153 over rather than a 154 under, so I'm going to be going with the 153 over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it here with Virginia. 681, 682 on the card. Texas State is on the road against Troy, and the men of Troy are a pretty good size favorite here of 9.5 points. Total, you're going to be getting that at a 142.5 to a 144, and did set my total at a 141. I do like the under. Texas State is one of the slower and more sloggy teams in all of college basketball, and just really haven't done a ton on offense. 278th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You do have a Troy team that is 8th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Warped stat, though, because they play that triple overtime game against USC, that double overtime game against San Diego State, so that's an extra 25 minutes added to the clock. And then for Texas State, more around about 235th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And with Texas State, the name of the game for them is pile drive the ball down low. They are number one in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the three-point line. And this is a Troy team that has been good on the interior. They're a top 130 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, while they're outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. And with this Troy team, they have been a top 150 team in terms of overall rebound percentage now, outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so they are allowing a lot of second and third chances, but I did set Troy as a result as an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Thomas Stout is averaging a double-double, 15.5 points, 10.3 rebounds, a little bit over a block per contest. Victor Valdez has been that main scorer with 17.5 points, 4.2 assists per game. This is a neither here nor there Troy team with their three-point shooting at 34%, and Valdez throws in there a 6.5 per contest. Troy last year was very good in terms of generating turnovers. They've taken a little bit of a fall off this year, but still, they're doing a relatively solid job with that regard. And for Texas State, to their credit, this is a team that, even though they don't necessarily shoot at the world's greatest, they are 61st in the country in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. So you are going to have scoring opportunities in this game, but with Troy doing a much better job in terms of generating turnovers now, they're back in the top 100 with that regard. And this being a Texas State team that has had all sorts of issues taking care of the ball, they're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. I think that that's going to be doomsday, especially with the Campbell brothers, Kobe and Cooper Campbell, doing a nice job. With Kobe Campbell, he shoots 40% from 3, 9 points per contest. Cooper shoots 39% from 3, 14.5 points, just under 5 assists per game. And then for Texas State, you've been able to get some very good production down low on this team, along with Caden Gums really running the show. Gums has not given you a lot of scoring. He's only been able to supply the team with about 8 points per game, but 4 assists from three-point range when you need him to step up. He shoots 45.5% from 3, and then down low, DJ turned it up. Paul, 7 boards, 12.5 points per game. Mark Drone has been able to give you about 13 points per contest as well, but team has had a few injuries with Tim Purnell dealing with a little bit of ailment, but he should be good to go in this game. He's shooting about 40% per 3. And I mean, Texas State, they don't take a lot of threes, but they're not a bad three-point shooting team. They shoot about 33% as a collective, but I do think that the turnovers are going to be costly. Texas State, they themselves top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so do think that you get a little bit of a sloppy game. Semi-total 141. I'm in on the under end with Troy. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10.5 with them. 683, 684 on the card. It is Clemson on the road against Syracuse. Syracuse, a home underdog of 1.5 points. 141.5 to 142 is the total. And with Clemson, I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Just really good balance with this Clemson team. They're in the top 55 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, playing very slowly outside the top 295 in terms of total possessions per game, while you've got a Clemson team that's right around about 245th with regards to total possessions per game. So both of these teams have slowed things down. To the credit of Syracuse, the defense is much better this year than it was a season ago. 26th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Syracuse, they've been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers. A top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but now they run into a Clemson team where their main forte on offense has been taking care of the ball. Right now, 15th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and it is a Syracuse offense that has been sliding away. They are right now 151st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they are shooting 59% at the free throw line. That is dead sinking last in all of college basketball. A lot of it has been due to the fact that Donnie Freeman has has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. And for Donnie Freeman, it does seem as though he is going to be good to go in this game against Clemson. And when he's at his full force, he's able to give you some rebounds. He's a good scorer, but we haven't seen him in quite a while. So what are you going to be able to get out of him? Meanwhile, you've got a lot of known elements with this Clemson team. It's a whole square than the sum of its parts approach. You've got 9 different guys for Clemson with at least 5.3 points per game. Nobody above 11.3 points per game, with that being RJ Godfrey, who leads the team with 11.3 points, 5.8 rebounds per game. And with the ancillary guys, they've been pretty solid at being able to pop it from 3, including Dylan Hunter, 45.5% three-point shooter, 9.5 points, 3 assists per game. Carter Welling, Justin Porter, they both give you 10.5 points per game. And Welling, he's able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Nick Davidson, about 4.5 boards per contest as well. So really like what these guys bring to the table. And then for Syracuse, while you are going to have Freeman back, again, what are you going to be able to get out of him? You've got Nathan George, who's been able to supply 5 assists per game. He's not a guy that is really going to just take ownership with regards to scoring, but 10.5 points, shoots about 32% from 3. And then Kyan Anthony and JJ Starlin, they combine for about 22 points per game. And Starlin's up to shooting about 35.5% from 3. He's been much more efficient with that regard. And William Kyle, he gives you 3.3 blocks per game. But in the end, I think that the overall balance of Clemson wins out, and that free throw shooting of Syracuse at 59%, I think is going to be costly. So my total out of 134.5, I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Clemson. Made them 4.5 point favorite, 685, 686 on the card. It is Stony Brook, and they're going to be on the road against William and Mary. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, you get both, and you get to lay between 10.5 and 11.5 points with them. Totals between 155.5 to a 156.5, and I'm going to take America's favorite tag team once again. I set William and Mary as a 14.5 point favorite. It's a William and Mary team that entered in their game against Towson 5th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They've been a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and it's going to be a bit of a tempo war. You've got a Stony Brook team that is currently 296th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Bill and Mary are 14th in the country with this regard. And for Stony Brook, you've been able to get some good production out of Eric Pratt. He comes over from UW Milwaukee, 18 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists. This is not a great 3-point shooting team, but it's not a bad one at about 34.5%. And to their credit, Stony Brook, they're a top 125 team in terms of guarding the 3-point line, but also for this Stony Brook team, they've been country average in terms of taking care of the ball. They are giving up a lot of second and third chances outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage, and they're outside the top 300 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage as well. So with a William & Mary team that does a great job locking it down from the outside, that's a bit of an issue. Now William & Mary, they themselves are having troubles taking care of the ball outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and William & Mary absolutely loves to go bombs away from 3, top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3, and they're shooting about 33.8% from 3. So again, country average, but they do a great job pile driving the ball inside. Top 25 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, and it's a whole square than the sum of its parts approach. How about this for balance for William & Mary? You've got 7 different guys between 9.1 and 11.4 points per game. I believe all but 2 of them are giving you at least 3.5 rebounds per game, with nobody giving you more than 4 rebounds per game. You've got, out of your top 4 scorers, 3 of them giving you at least 2.6 assists per game. Like, that is a way that you balance things out. Caden Haskins has been able to shoot 38% from 3-point range. He's been really one of their top scorers, along with Joel Emanuel, shooting 46% from 3. But a lot of guys that just shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. You've been able to get good production out of Chase Lowe, who's been that main facilitator with 4.8 boards, 4.4 assists, 9.5 points per game. A little bit ahead of the sync for this team, but William & Mary much better defensively than they've been in the past. Now, William & Mary is having a little bit of a tough time on the glass. They've been outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they do not give themselves any sort of second and third chances. 9.1 offensive rebounds per game outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, but I do think that you get an up and down game. I do think that William & Mary sees a little bit of regression with their 3-point shooting defense, but I think William & Mary just executes inside with their offense. Somebody told 156.5. I like the 155.5 over, and I'm willing to lay up to 14 here with old Bill and Mary. 687, 688 on the card. Dayton is playing against Fordham. Fordham is a 16.5 to a 17.5 point dog. 137.5 to a 138.5 is the total. I set a line of a 131.5. I'm going to be in on the under for Fordham. This team is doing a supreme job of being able to slow down games. Fordham, in terms of total possessions per game, in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball, and they're 35th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they do have to now take on a Dayton team that has been very good at generating turnovers. Top 15 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for Dayton, they've spent sped things up, 116th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But if you look at home, they're more of a country average team with regards to their tempo at their roots. This is a Dayton team that typically likes to play a little bit more slow and controlled, and typically Dayton is a solid three-point shooting team. Not so much the case this year. They're shooting 32.5% from three. That's hovering right around about 240th in all of college basketball. Just Sean Montgomery has been a solid three-point shooter, 15 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 42.5% from three. And Keontae Jones, who comes over from CSUN, shoots about 43% from three, 8.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's been very well-rounded there, but Dayton not really giving themselves second at their chances outside the top 275 in terms of percentage of their missed shots. That result in an offensive rebound, and Dayton is getting absolutely clobbered from three-point range. They are outside the top 340 in opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Now, this is not a Fordham team that's necessarily going to go into flamethrower mode from three-point range. They're shooting 30.5% from three-point range as 30.5%, not 30 and 8.5 or anything like that. But that said, DeJure Reeves is coming along for the ride. He shoots 35.5% from three, 16.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Love what he's able to bring to the table. Christian Henry has been able to step up with about 5.5 assists per game. They've been dealing with an injury to Zariq Nutter for much of the season, double-figure score over at Northern Illinois and Georgia State, and even with them being out of the fold, they've been able to find a bunch of guys to be able to step up on the glass. Like Rikus Schulte has been able to give you 12.5 points, 9.7 boards. You've been able to get good production out of Abes Bajoga, who's been able to give you about 5 boards, 7 points per contest as well. So really like the way that these guys are able to form that. And for this Fordham team, they have been a top 50 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage. They're a top 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And I do think that Fordham is going to look to pound the ball inside. I think that they're going to make this a slow, grimy game, and that's going to be able to keep them in there, especially with having the Hawaii transfers and Akira Jacobs along with Marcus Green, both give you about 4.5 points per game, doing a good job of chipping in. I set my line at an 11.5. I'm taking the points for Fordham, and I'm in on the under. 689, 690 on the card. Rice, we give our ode to Lane Kiffin go well. We'll say are on the road against Tulsa, and Tulsa just find themselves as a favorite here of 13.5 points, 151.5 to 152.5 is the total, and made a total of 152.5. I do like the over for Tulsa. This has just been a really supremely efficient team with regards to their offense, and it's not even necessarily a team that's going to be looking to push tempo. You've got a Rice team that's relatively mid-tempo, about 130th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Tulsa, about 199th in the country with this regard, but for the Tulsa, they just do a really, really good job in terms of being able to execute their stuff. They're 62nd in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They shoot as a collective well over 38.5% from three-point range, and for Rice, this has not been an efficient offense. They are 269th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, while you've got your Tulsa Kings currently at 22nd in the country. I did as a result set Tulsa as a 14.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay that number. Now with Rice, I do believe that they're going to be able to get a bit of production out of their backcourt, as you've been able to get good production out of Jalen Smith, Elantre Barneau. Barneau is really that main facilitator, 14 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists, shoots 36% from 3, and Smith shoots 42% from 3, 12.5 points, 3 assists per game. But for Rice, they have been killed by turnovers over the last few seasons, back outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. To their credit, top 100 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but outside the top 325 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, it's a Rice team that's about country average in terms of guarding the 3-point line. And for Rice, they've been a top 140 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But I do think that Tulsa, with having a main deadline scorer in Miles Barnstable, who comes over from St. Thomas and has been absolutely tremendous for the team, 14 points from 3-point range. He's bombing it at 44% from 3. I don't know if this is a mainstay, but Tylen Riley, 50% 3-point shooter, 15 points, 3.5 assists per game. Miles Rigsby, about 2.5 assists, 10 points. He's been rock solid. You've had David Green, only shoot 30% from 3 after being a 40% 3-point shooter at Rhode Island, but still gives you 14 points per game. I think that the options that you got for this Tulsa team, a little bit too much. And for this Tulsa group, they have been a top 55 team with regards to rebound percentage. Some of the guys that don't give you a ton of scoring, like an Ian Smichael, has been able to do a nice job. He's been supplying the team with about 4.5 rebounds per game. Team goes for Roma Dean, and I believe that overall versatility and depth is going to be able to win out in this case. I did set Rice as a underdog of 14.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Tulsa. Made my total a 152.5, so at the 151.5, I'm also in on the over. 691, 682 on the card. St. Bonaventure is on the road against VCU. VCU 10.5 to 11.5 point favorites. 153.5 to 154.5 is the total, and I set Bonaventure as a 7.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. You know that St. Bonaventure is going to be looking to slow things down, and honestly, 247th in terms of total possessions per game is faster than what they typically play. VCU, they've certainly sped themselves up. They're about 91st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But you had a VCU team that overall they're solid in a lot of respects, 35th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've got a Bonnie team that's actually been 96, so St. Bonaventure has been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of being able to execute a lot of different things, as you've got Daryl Buddy Simmons, who's been the main guy in the backcourt, give you about 14.5 points per game, shoots 38% from three. But what I think is really going to be the X factor here for the Bonnies is Frank Mitchell, the way that he's able to give you a double-double, a little bit over a block, a steal, 16.5 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. Not really going to pop it and lock it from three, but Daniel Igbeniwe, who's 6'7", he shoots 41% from three, 9.5 points, only about 3 rebounds per game out of him. But the Bonnies, I think, are going to be able to hold in there thanks to the fact that they do a tremendous job of being able to give themselves second and third chances in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. St. Bonaventure is right now checking in 21st in all of college basketball. 37% of their misses result in an offensive rebound, and VCU is not too far behind. They are 27th in the country with this regard, and for VCU, it's very much a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach. You've been able to have Nick Black, who is a former top 75 recruit, do a relatively solid job, stepping up as freshman with about 10.5 points, about 2.2 assists per game. That would be Nick Lewis, by the way. My bad on that. But that said, you've got right now for this team 6 different guys who give you at least 8.2 points per game, with your main headline scorer being Terrence Hill, 13 points per contest, about 2 assists. He shoots 44% from 3-point. And Jadarian Tracy, who comes over from Oregon, he's been able to shoot 40.5% from 3, 10.5 points per contest. Barry Evans, who followed Phil Martelli Jr. on over from Bryant, has been highly versatile, 9.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. And for VCU, they're solid with regards to their defense. They've been a top 40 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They have been outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've done a relatively solid job holding up with that regard, and you've got a Bonaventure team that's become a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis as well. But I do believe that both of these teams are going to be able to do a solid job giving themselves second and third chances, but I think the Bonaventure are going to get back to their roots, play a little bit more slowly, and keep themselves in this game. I set my total here at a 149.5, so I like the under, and with Bonaventure at anything of 8+, we'll take those points. 693, 694 on the card. Campbell is going to be on the road against Monmouth. Monmouth is a home favorite of 1.5 points, 153.5 is the total. And with Monmouth, I set them as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. The big thing for this Campbell team is that they are playing very up-tempo under John Andrewchuk. They're 131st in the country in terms of total possessions per game after being outside the top 275 last year. And Monmouth, they're now 274th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So a little bit of a flipper-rooney for Monmouth. They're never a great 2-point shooting team. They're back outside the top 275 this season. And to the credit of Campbell, they've been 104th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound, but for Campbell, the sloppiness and not being able to take care of the ball, I think is going to be very costly. 310th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Monmouth team that's more around about country average at 159th. Now, you've been able to have DJ Turn It Up Smith for this Campbell team be your main scorer. He's been able to supply 18 plus points per contest, and they've needed it because this is a Campbell team that they only shoot 30.7% from 3-point. Smith shoots 35.5% from 3, and then you've had Jeremiah Johnson Jr. be able to give you about 34% 3-point shooting, 13.5 points per game. Really, the lone two guys on the roster that shoot above 30.6% from 3. Now, for this Campbell team, you've been able to have 2 guys in Chris Fields and Davideus Butka combined for 17.2 rebounds per game, so they've done a nice job there. And between the two of them, they're generating about 2.5 steals per game. And this is a Campbell team that's become a top 200 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're getting absolutely drilled from 3-point range. They're allowing teams to shoot 36.5% per 3. That's hovering right around 300th in all of college basketball. And with Monmouth not doing a good job with regards to their interior offense, they need to look to the outside, and they've been shooting 35% from 3-point range, with having Jason Rivera-Torres do a nice job with supplying about 14.5 points, 7.5 boards, 1.6 blocks, 1.7 steals per game. He does it all. Jack Collins, not much of a scorer with 8 points per game, but about 5.5 boards, 5.3 assists, 2.3 steals per contest while shooting 34.5% from 3. And then the ancillary guys like Justin Ray, Alon Cornelius Robinson Jr., combined for 21 points per game. They both shoot over 40% from 3-point range. This has been a Monmouth team that they themselves have really allowed a lot of open looks from 3. They're outside the top 280 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. But with Monmouth, they're also one of the best interior defenses in all of college basketball. Top 40 team in terms of block shot percentage, with having a little bit over a block per contest out of Doc Mortar, and then additionally with Rivera-Torres giving you the blocks that he does. I do think that this Monmouth team does win from within. I did set my total at 153.5 because both of these teams should be able to find some good looks from 3-point range. Right now it's sitting between 153.5 to 154. I would be willing to take a 154 or higher to the under to go along with Monmouth laying this small number. 695, 696 on the card. It is Towson. They are on the road against Hampton. Hampton is a home underdog of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 135.5 is the total, and I said a total year of a 127.5. I'm in on the under. You got two teams that are going to be not really looking to gun it here. Towson, 359th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Hampton is a little bit faster, but for Hampton, they're right now checking in a hearty 314th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Towson, they had a rough go of it a few days ago when they went up against William & Mary, but I actually just believe that William & Mary is a pretty rock-solid team. And then you've got a Hampton team that's had a tough time taking care of the ball, 261st in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Meanwhile, Towson, more of a country average team with 163rd, and Towson just flat out has a better backcourt. You've got two go-to scorers in Tyler Tejada along Dylan Williamson. They're combined for about 32.5 points per game. They don't necessarily shoot it well from three. Towson right now shooting 29.3% from the outside the top 320 in all of college basketball. I do think that there's a little bit of positivity there, and Towson games just don't involve a lot of free throws. Towson is both a top 45 team in terms of not putting you on the free throw line, and they're outside the top 300 in terms of getting to the free throw line. So not a lot of fouling there. You've got a Towson team, though, that they do a great job on the glass. Top 50 team with regards to rebound percentage, with Jack Dombia give you 5.5 rebounds per game. Teado, I mentioned before, 6.2 boards per contest. And then it's just by committee with having Chike and Defu being able to give you about only 3.3 points, but 4 rebounds per game. Morsek, a true 7-footer, is able to give you 3.5 boards, just under a block per contest. So they do a great job with that regard. And then for Hampton, they've been able to get quite a bit of production out of a double-double machine in Mr. Xavier Long, 10.4 points, 11 rebounds, 2.5 assists per game. He's dealt with a little bit of injury throughout the season, but should be good to go in this game. Michael Ely and Jaquil Gaines-Wyatt have been the headliners in the backcourt with 11.5 points per game apiece, but both only shoot about 31% from three. They matched Towson in their inability to be able to knock it down from three, shooting 27.9% from the outside. This has been a good perimeter defense, top 125 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but Towson very content to be driving the ball down low. It's a Hampton team that I think is going to have a very difficult time in terms of being able to match up on the glass, because other than Xavier Long, you only have one other player on the roster give you over 3.5 rebounds per game. That'll be Daniel Johnson, 9.5 points, 4.9 rebounds per game. And I do think that Towson finds a way to be able to win from within in a slog of a game. Set by a line of 7.5, willing to lay with Towson. And on the under, set by total 127.5, 697, 698 on the card. Northeastern is going to be on the road against North Carolina A&T, and A&T finds themselves as a home underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points. 154.5 is the total, and made a total of a 153.5. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got two teams that are relatively mid-tempo. North Carolina A&T hovering right around about 180th in terms of total possessions per game. Northeastern is more around about 162nd, and for Northeastern, they do need to clean up the issues that they've had in terms of taking care of the ball. 273rd in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. North Carolina A&T right there with them at 281st, and with A&T, I did have to set them as an underdog here of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Northeastern. I recognize that for Northeastern, things have been a little bit less than savory with their main scorer in L.A. Pratt being out of the lineup for now, I believe, 9 games, so that's been a little bit of an issue, but Xavier Alari has been able to do a nice job down low, 10.5 points, 7.5 boards, a little bit over block per contest, and Yori Fritz also gives you a little bit over a block per game as well. This is a unit that has been a top 125 team in terms of block shot percentage. Now with this bunch as well, they've been giving up a lot of good 2-point looks. They're outside the top 3 with that regard, but this Northeastern team all of a sudden is shooting about 35.7% from 3. That's a top 110 mark in all of college basketball. They've been able to really get it out of William Kamori Jr., shooting 40% from 3, 8.5 points per game, and then J.B. Frankel has stepped up in a big way. He's shooting a little bit over 40% from 3-point range, and then for North Carolina A&T, it's just a very, shall we say, top-heavy team, as you've got 2 Walkers and Lewis Walker along Luron Walker, who have both been able to give you 16-plus points per game, but Luron Walker is back out of the lineup due to injury. He's missed 6 games. He's been on again, off again. That's been an issue. And then for Lewis Walker, well, he gives you 18.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Only shoots 26.5% from 3. Luron Walker is by far the best 3-point shooter in this team's roster, and with him out of the fold, you only have one guy pretty much that sees substantial minutes that shoots above 29% from 3-point range. Bryson Ogletree, he shoots about 42.5% from 3-point range. Been around the block. He's been able to give the team about 7 points per contest, but for this A&T team, they're also getting gashed from outside. They're line teams who shoot about 35% from 3. That is outside the top 260 in all of college basketball. They've been pretty good with regards to their interior defense, and they've been a top 200 team with regards to rebound percentage. You've been able to get about 4.5 rebounds per game out of William Felton, KG Dembrick, and Amandu Dumbia. So these guys have been able to provide some size, but I do think that this team is going to get blitzed from the outside, and Northeastern is able to go bombs away from 3-point range. I did set my total at a 153.5. 6.5. I think that the sloppiness costs you an over, so in on the under and a to lay it with Northeastern, 699, 700 on the card. UAB is playing us to Wichita State. Wichita State, an underdog of 1.5 points, 149.5 is the total, and I said Wichita State is a 3.5 point dog. I'm going to be willing to lay it. UAB just does a really good job in terms of protecting the ball. Now, for UAB, this is also a team that has been well outside the top 300 with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, but 8th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. That's something that really stands out to me. And you got a pair of teams that have been very rock solid down low. With Wichita State, they bring in the 7'2" big man from Purdue in the Berg, Will Berg, who's been able to give you 8.8 points, 8 rebounds per contest. He's able to give you a little bit of a block per contest as well. And then Keenan Giles has really elevated this team with regards to his 3-point shooting. He's shooting about 40% from 3, 17 points per contest. And then Karan Boyd, he shoots 40.5% from the outside, 10.5 points, 5.8 rebounds per game. Wichita State now a top 85 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, and a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. But this is also a UAB team that they themselves have been able to do a nice job in terms of grabbing some second and third chances. They're about 48th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Doesn't quite compare to Wichita State being 11th, but you know what? I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job with Chance Westery, just being able to give you a little bit of everything. Westery has done a great job being able to give the team 16 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. He only shoots about 28.5% from 3-point range, but you've been able to have Ahmad Robinson step up, give this team 12.5 points, about 4 assists per game as well. And for UAB, what they lack with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, they make up with being able to hit those offensive boards, and they look to pile drive the ball down low. UAB is a top 20 team in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and this is a UAB team that has been able to do a very solid job in terms of not allowing second and third chances as well. They're a top 40 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're a little bit above average in terms of opponent shooting. They're a top 150 team in terms of opponents 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Country average team in terms of generating turnovers, and have a little bit of tempo battle here. Wichita State 308th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UAB has become a little bit more of a mid-tempo team here at 141st. I think that at their core, UAB is going to look to run a little bit more, but I do think that the overall lack of shooting is going to be costly in this game for UAB, but I do think that UAB does a great job getting those second and third chances and find a way to get the job done. I say UAB is a 3.5 point favorite. We'll lay the 1.5 with them, and I'm in on the under, semi-total 147.5, 701, 702 on the card. You've got Kansas City on the road against Denver. UMKC, the Kangaroos, are a 10.5 point underdog. Total on this game, 157.5 to a 158.5, and with UMKC, I did set them as an underdog of 12.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. You've got a UMKC team that has really sped themselves up this year. I don't know why. They're 78th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Last year, they were outside the top 300, and they're outside the top 300 in terms of both points scored on a per possession basis and turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, they do face off against a Denver team that has been unsightly with regards to their defense. Denver is currently 181st in terms of total possessions per game, so a relatively mid-tempo team. And it's not even like UMKC when they're at full force. This is a team that typically does a good job down low, being able to execute with regards to rebounding. It's not like they're giving themselves second and third chances. They're right now about 249th in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they're getting blasted on defense as well. UMKC is right now 302nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now Denver is a nice hearty 362nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home. Also in the bottom 5 with that regard as well. But who on this UMKC team is going to be able to knock down a 3? Because Denver is a line team to shoot darn near 40% for 3. They're a bottom 10 team in the country with that regard. But UMKC is right now shooting 30.8% for 3. That's hovering right around 300th in the country. You've had Carmelo Branch along with Jason Petty combined to shoot about 33.5% for 3. They both give you 12.5 points per contest. And in the credit of Petty, about a steal and a half per game. Uriah Evans has been able to give you a steal and a half, 4 assists, 11.5 points per game. But still, again, this team is turning the ball over a ton. To the credit of UMKC, they become a top 225 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. UMKC is outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they're getting just absolutely tattooed down low. For UMKC, they are outside the top 320 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and for the Denver team, they make their hay from the outside. This team is shooting 38.5% from 3. That is a top 35 mark in all of college basketball, as you've got each out of your top 4 scorers shooting at least 38.3% from 3. The North Dakota State transfer in Jeremiah Burke, 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 38.5% from 3. Carson Johnson shoots 43% from 3 with 17.5 points per game. Logan Kinsey, 40% 3-point shooter, and Zane Nelson for 59% from 3. That's very zany, to say the least. I think that that'll be going downward a little bit, but for Denver, what they do lack with regards to their defense, I think UMKC lacks with regards to their offense. This is a Denver team that they themselves are outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Denver's not going to force the issue. They're outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Very interesting ordeal here here. I think that UMKC at their core, they're going to look to slow things down just a little bit. So I set my total here at a 156.5, here at the 157 plus in on the under, but with Denver, I'm willing to lay it. I set them as a 12.5 point favorite. 703, 704 on the card. It is Georgia Tech on the road against Duke, and Duke finds themselves as 25.5 to 26.5 point favorites. So this game, a 151.5, and I did set my total at 148.5. I'm going to be in on the under. Now, Georgia Tech has actually seen each of their last 3 games go over the total, and Georgia Tech is a team that's going to be looking to actually push a little bit of tempo. Right now, Georgia Tech is 65th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Duke, a very mid-tempo team. They're about 155th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but Duke, just a very well-rounded team. They're currently number 4 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. In terms of that offensive efficiency, 23rd in the country in terms of points scored per possession. But I mean, for Georgia Tech, this has been a top 35 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Even with that, though, I did have to set them as a 28.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay it. You've got a Georgia Tech team that is right now shooting about 35% from 3 with Kawasi Reeves and Bate Ndongo both shooting over 40% from 3. Now, Ndongo missed 4 games due to injury, returned in their last game. He's supplying about 12 points, 8 rebounds per game. That helps him out down low, and has some versatility with 3 assists per game. Lamar Washington has been a do-it-all point guard with about 11 points, 5 boards, 6 assists, steal and a half per contest, but what has been costly for Georgia Tech has been the turnovers. They're outside the top 275 in terms of their ball security, and with this Georgia Tech team, they just don't do a great job on the inside. They're outside the top 270 with regards to 2-point shooting percentage, even with having Mohamed Salle give you about 11.2 points, 8.4 rebounds per game. And then for Duke, obviously Cameron Boozer is the main attraction. He's the odds-on favorite to win the Wooden Award, and in my opinion, rightfully so. 23.5 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, steal and a half, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point. Sure, it's not a thing that this guy isn't doing, but the interior defense has been great. Patrick Ngangba is giving you 6.5 rebounds, block and a half per contest. Isaiah Evans throws in there 12 points. He's become a little bit more versatile and well-rounded. He gives you a block per game, only shooting about 34% from 3. And Duke, not necessarily a flamethrower from 3-point. I'm not saying that they're bad with their 3-point shooting, but I mean, they're shooting about 35.3% from 3. That's outside the top 100 nationally, but they're a top 20 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They themselves a top 10 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, with James Sarr doing a nice job down low, 6.5 points, 4 rebounds per game. Caleb Foster, not really going to light you up a ton from 3, but he gives you 9 points, and when they do need him to pop it from 3, he's been shooting darn near 40% there. I do think that Duke just executes their stuff. One of the most well-rounded teams in all of college basketball, finds a way to get the job done against the Georgia Tech team that might be playing a little bit too fast for their own good with their turnovers. So I did set my total at a 148.5. I like the under of Duke. I'm willing to lay up to 28 with them. 705, 706 on the card. North Texas is on the road. They're facing off against Memphis. Memphis is a 10.5 to an 11.5 point favorite. 132.5 to 133.5 is the total, and I set Memphis as an 11.5 point favorite. So at 11 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This is a Memphis team that has had all sorts of issues, and for Memphis, ever since Penny Hardaway has taken over, it always feels like turnovers are the main crux for the team, and that's a big reason why they're sitting here at 225th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But you've got a North Texas offense that has been even less efficient, 274th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and North Texas is actually a relatively solid offense when they're at home, but when they're in a road/neutral court setting, this team just has not been able to score whatsoever. Right now for North Texas, they have yet to exceed 64 points in a road or neutral court game. Like, good grief. At some point, they need to get something going, and Memphis is not necessarily monsters of the midway with regards to their defense, but they've been a top 175 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're allowing too many second and third chances. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' offensive rebound percentage, but Doug McDaniel, 14.5 points, 5 assists, 2 steals per contest, shoots 37% from 3. He's been rock solid, and for Memphis, a big issue that you've had with this team is injuries, as Hassan Abdul-Hakim, Curtis Givens, and Julius Redford all miss at least 3 games this season. These are 3 very primary guys for the team, and then you just need Aaron Bradshaw to live up to his billing, a former top 20 recruit that's only give you 7.5 points, 3.5 boards, and 3.5 fouls per game. So that's not necessarily great. This Memphis team is only shooting about 32% from 3-point range, but for Memphis, they've also been a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. For North Texas, they are back outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game as well. So I set a low total here. I set my total at a 133.5. At a 132.5 would be willing to take a shot on the over, mainly because I do think that Memphis is going to be looking to crank it up a little bit, and I do think that North Texas, at some point, they exceed 64 points away from home, as you've got Jashawn Stevenson give you 16 points per game, and really this offense has floundered ever since Will McClendon, who came over from UCLA alongside San Jose State went out with an injury, but still have David Terrell is able to give you 12 points per game. North Texas having an issue with regards to their 3-point shooting, as EJ Horton, he's able to shoot 40% from 3, but he's only give you 3.5 points per game, and he's pretty much the lone out of their top 7 healthy scorers that shoots above 32.5% from 3-point range. And North Texas is a team that's going to give up a lot of second and third chances outside the top 250 themselves. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, they've been pretty good with regards to guarding the 3-point line. Teams are only shooting 28.5% from 3 against them, but Memphis is a team that's going to be looking to pile drive the ball down low against them. North Texas top 50 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and I think with both teams turning the ball over, that leads to a lot of fast break buckets. So I did set my line at 11.5. I'm willing to lay up to 11 with Memphis, and at a 133 or less, I'm in on the over. 707, 708 on the card. It is Georgia State. They're going to be on the road against Marshall, and Marshall finds themselves as a favorite of 12.5 to 13.5 points. 150.5 is the total, and made Marshall the 14-point favorite. So willing to lay up to 13.5 with them. Georgia State just has not been good with their offense at all in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. 352nd now. Marshall has a massive turnover issue, even with the turnover issue. So Marshall is 148th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And after it was really bad for Marshall in the first few games of the season with regards to turnovers, they've been able to do a little bit better job of taking care of the ball. They're still outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but things are starting to get a little bit more clean with Jalen spearheading the things. I guess you could say spearheading it. 13.5 points, 5.8 assists per contest, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, and that's much of this Marshall team. Among players with at least one made 3 out of their top 6 scores, all but one of them shoot between 32.1 and 34.8% from 3-point range. And we've got a guy that doesn't attempt threes in 7'4" Matthew Von Coleman, who should be able to dominate things down low. 9.4 points, 3.1 blocks, 8.2 rebounds per game. Now, Marshall is allowing a lot of second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. That's mainly because they're getting nearly 6 blocks per contest as well. And when you get blocks, that means that teams are going to get a few more second and third chances. And Marshall has been a top 65 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and that's big against a Georgia State team that is currently 322nd with their 3-point shooting percentage at about 30.5%. And they're actually even worse with their 2-point shooting percentage. So that's not great to say the least. Now, the good news for Georgia State is that Jelani Hamilton, their top scorer, 17 points per game. He missed 5 games earlier in the season. He's all good to go here. He's shooting 38.5% from 3-point range. That ignites a little bit of life into this team. You've got Micah Tucker, Malachi Brown, who've been able to combine for about 21.5 points per game. And with these two guys, they combine for about 5.6 assists and about 2.7 steals per game. It's a Georgia State team that has been a little bit below country average in terms of generating turnovers, and this has been a team that's been pretty brutal with regards to their rebounding. They're outside the top 225 with regards to rebound percentage, but they've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Where they're really getting gashed is along the outside, and you've got a Marshall team that's very much going to be looking to push tempo, 100th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Georgia State is 140th, but I do think that Georgia State, even though they get a little bit more scoring with the return of Jelani Hamilton, that'll be enough to be able to help you out with the over, as I did set my total at a 152. I just don't think that they find a way to be able to cover this number, though. I did set Marshall as the 14-point favorite, so want to lay with Marshall, and I'm going to be in on that. Over 709, 710 on the card. It is George Washington, and our nation's first president is on the road against Richmond. It's not quite the Battle of Trenton, but George Washington finds themselves as a favorite of 2.5 points. 161.5 to 164.5 is the total, and I set George Washington as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for George Washington. It's been a little bit up and down with regards to this team. Losing that game to Delaware a few weeks ago was not necessarily great, to say the least, but it's a George Washington team that's going to be looking to push some tempo. 64th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Richmond is up to 102nd. This is much faster than what they've been playing in recent years, and for Richmond, pretty efficient on offense. They're currently 72nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've got a George Washington team that's more around about 42nd, but if you look at the way that George Washington has been able to execute in a roadside score venue, they're a top 15 team in the country with regards to points per possession. Now, I did set a total of a 158. I'm in on the under, as I do think that Richmond is going to get back to the roots a little bit more with a little bit of a slower tempo, and for this Richmond team, they've been able to do the little things well. They're a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They've been a top 100 team with regards to overall rebound percentage as well, and it's been a whole greater than some of its parts approach. You've got someone like Jonathan Beagle, who's been able to step up in a big way. He's not necessarily going to give you a lot of scoring, but about 6 boards, 7.5 points per game. Your main scorer is actually AJ Lopez with about 12.2 points per game game for a team that shoots about 34.5% from three-point shooting. Daughtry has been able to shoot a little bit over 42% from three. Will Johnson shoots 40% from three, and these are two guys that combine for about 19.2 points per game. But for George Washington, being able to have Garrett Johnson back has been massive for them, as he's a bit of a do-it-all guy at about 6'8" or so, 13.5 points, 4.5 boards from three-point range right now. He's shooting about 33% from three, and for George Washington, it's a good but not great three-point shooting team at 35.5%. They're just really good at getting the ball down low and getting to the free throw line. Top 50 team in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis, or a top 55 team in terms of their overall two-point shooting percentage, and they're not allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. This has been a top 75 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage, and for George Washington, even though they might not necessarily be like a Tarleton State or anything like that with regards to generating turnovers, this has been a good team in terms of being able to force some turnovers as well. They are currently checking in 128th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Have a Richmond team that has been 90th in the country as well. So both of these teams are able to take away the ball relatively well with this George Washington team. You also have Rafael Castro down low, who's going to give you 15 points, a little bit over a steal and a half, 7 boards per contest, like what he's able to bring to the table. But I do think that those two guards in Trey Dinkins along Christian Jones combined for 20 points per game. Dinkins shoots 40% from three. Jones is able to give you 2.5 assists per contest. I think that that's going to be just enough for the team to be able to get the job done. I did set a total here of a 158. I do think that those turnovers help you out with the under, so I'm in on the under, and I'm going to lay it with George Washington. 7-11, 7-12 on the card. It is St. Joe's. They hope to not be average. Joe's on the road against St. Louis. St. Louis is a 19.5 to a 20.5 point favorite. 156.5 to a 158.5 is the total, and I said St. Louis as a 20.5 point favorite. So 20 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's a St. Louis unit that is really executing on all fronts. So one thing that they do need to do a better job of is taking care of the ball. They've been outside the top 240 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but I am for the St. Louis team. They're looking to play fast. They're 28th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they themselves have been able to do a little bit of a better job in terms of generating turnovers, up to about 202nd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, which doesn't sound like much, but last year they were outside the top 300 with that regard, and this is a St. Louis team that is doing a really good job in terms of finding a way to be able to give themselves some second and third chances as well. They are 28th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and for St. Joe's, they just have not been able to find any sort of three-point shooting whatsoever. For St. Joseph's, they are well outside the top 300 with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. Now, they have been pretty strong down low, as you've got the Harvard transfer who has been able to do a nice job down low, Justice Ajabor, 5 points, right around about 4.3 rebounds per game, but 2 blocks per game. And then Deuce Jones, he's been able to supply the team with about 16 points per contest, and he was their main scorer. He's now left the program, and I had to downgrade them significantly for that. Now, he was only shooting about 26.5% from three. That's a little bit below their average of 27.5%. Jaden Glover has been the main three-point shooter with about 38% three-point shooting, 15 points per game, but that leaves with the lone double-figure scorer outside of Glover being Derek Simpson, who gives you 10.5 points per game. He only shoots 24.5% from three. The team is doing a nice job of grabbing rebounds. This has been a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound, and if St. Joe's can just find a way to get to the free throw line, they've been a top 50 team with that regard as well. But you do have a St. Louis team that's been rather disciplined with that regard, and even though Robbie Avila is not putting up the same numbers that he has in the past, 12.5 points per game, it's just a really nice collective right now for the St. Louis team. You've got 9 different guys that give you at least 6.3 points per game. Paulo Tino is able to give you about 4 boards per contest. He's been a nice ancillary piece. Deion Brown, 13 points, 7 boards per assists. He shoots 35% from three. As a whole, St. Louis is shooting about 37.5% from three. They're a top 10 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, as well as they've been cleaning up the turnovers. They've been getting more and more efficient with that regard as well. And they're a top 20 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. So I did set St. Louis as a 20.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and just don't think that St. Joe's knocks down the 3-pointers needed for the over. So I told 154.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay with St. Louis. 7-13, 7-14 on the card. It is South Dakota on the road against North Dakota State. North Dakota State is a 10.5 point favorite total on this game, 162.5 to a 164.5, and with the Bison, I did set them as a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for North Dakota State. This team has been very good in terms of generating turnovers. They become a top 110 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you do have a South Dakota unit that has been quite good in giving themselves second and third chances. They are now 89th in the country in terms of percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound, but North Dakota State matches at 84th in the country in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound as well. Now, North Dakota State has really taken a fall off with their three-point shooting percentage last season. They were a top 5 team with this regard. Now they're shooting about 34.5% for three, which is more around country average, but Damari Wheeler-Thomas has stepped up as a main guy, 15 points, 3.5 assists. He shoots 40% from three. Travion Carson has been able to shoot 40% from three. Markai Strickland, I just don't feel like he's the world's greatest fit with the team. 14 points, 4 rebounds, and he hasn't made a single three all season long, but you've been able to have this team do a little bit better job on the glass with being able to get right around about 5 rebounds, bringing out Trayson Anderson, Noah Federson, Anthony Stefanovic. He throws in there about 4.5 assists per game, and to the credit of North Dakota State, they've been a top 120 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and South Dakota last year was a top 5 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. We have seen that very much go southward as they're now turning the ball for 13 times per game outside the top 10 with that regard. South Dakota is still a great team in terms of getting to the free throw line, top 25 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis, but they're also getting absolutely bludgeoned down low with regards to their interior defense. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, even with having the 7-footer and Cameron Fens give you 11.5 points, 6.8 boards, a little bit over a block per contest. Isaac Bruns, he's a part of Bruns Squared as his brother Paul graduated after last season, 20.5 points, 5 boards. His brother's on the team, but he's not playing at all. And then you've got Isaiah Butin, who's been able to give you about 10 points, 3.5 assists per game to be able to headline things there. And South Dakota has been a little bit better in terms of generating turnovers, top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I think that North Dakota State going to be able to match what South Dakota does down low. With South Dakota now turning the ball over a ton, I do think that allows this North Dakota State team to be able to get the job done. South Dakota back in the top 30 with regards to total possessions per game, but I do think that in the end, North Dakota State finds a way to get the job done, and the North Dakota State three-point shooting seems to be going northward as the season goes along. So a total of 165.5 out of 165 or less, like the over end, one to lay up to 13 with North Dakota State. 7:15, 7:16 on the card. UConn is on the road against Xavier. Xavier, a 12.5 point home underdog with a total of 145.5. Semi-line at 13.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with UConn. This UConn team has just been so great defensively, and for this UConn bunch, they should be able to absolutely dominate on the glass. They're a solid but not great team in terms of giving themselves second chances, 90th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and the one thing that Xavier has actually done a really good job of, they are not allowing teams to get second chances. They are allowing teams to grab about 22.4% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is number 17 in all of college basketball, but UConn is not far from matching that. They're right around about 60th in all of college basketball, and part of that was with Terrence Reed missing for a bit of the season. He's back. He's been able to give the team 6+ rebounds per game, and then you know exactly what Alex Caravan is going to be able to bring to the table. Good versatility with about 13.5 points, 5 boards. He's shooting 44% from 3-point. And UConn has been pedestrian with their 3-point shooting at about 34.5%, but they have been able to do a nice job with regards to their overall defense. Top 15 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They've been a top 125 team in terms of generating turnovers, and that's big against a Xavier team that has done actually a very good job in terms of protecting the ball. It hasn't necessarily resulted in the cleanest of offense, as Xavier so outside the top 85 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but Xavier, 9.5 turnovers per game, top 30 mark in all of college basketball. You've got a Xavier team that is fast, but they're not necessarily warp speed fast, while you've got UConn at 282nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so a little bit of a tempo war. Xavier more around about 101st, and then with this Xavier squad, Trey Carroll has been caroling all the way to give you 16.5 points, 5.5 boards on 30% 3-point shooting, and then you've got all right along with Jovan Misevich, who have been able to combine for about 43.5% 3-point shooting, 21 points between the two of them, but this is a Xavier team that they just don't execute inside. They're outside the top 300 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. They've been okay but not amazing at grabbing second chances. They're more just really good at not allowing opponents to be able to grab second chances, and for this team as well, they're outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You've got Philip Barakovin, who's been able to give you about 7.5 boards, 8.5 points per game, but he's right now one of 2 guys on the roster giving you over 4.3 rebounds per game. That should allow UConn to be able to dominate this game with Solo Ball starting to heat up with regards to his 3-point shooting, give you double figures. I'd like UConn to be able to get the job done here. And Malachi Smith has been able to do a nice job in terms of giving you 3+ assists per game off the bench as well. So UConn is a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it in. I'm in on the under, being by a total of 143.5. 7:17, 7:18 on the card. It is DePaul, and they are going to be on the road against Villanova, and Villanova finds themselves as 13.5 point favorites. 135.5 to 136.5 is the total, and I did said Villanova is 12.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with DePaul. Now, DePaul has been all over the place with regards to their offense, but this has been a team that has actually been able to do a pretty rock solid job defensively. DePaul, not necessarily the most dominant team with regards to their rebounding, as you've had NJ Benson be able to supply 7+ rebounds per game. What you get outside of him is a little bit of a horse apiece situation, but it's a DePaul team that is 51st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and have a Villanova team that's outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now, for what Villanova doesn't do with regards to their exterior defense, they do a nice job of inside. They're still a top 80 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, thanks to having Duke Brandon give you 12 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. And for Villanova, it's been all about Bryce Lindsey in the backcourt. 44.2% three-point shooter, 16.5 points, 2.6 assists per game, but still allowing teams to shoot 37.7% from three-point. And Villanova's actually been a solid team in terms of generating turnovers. They're back to playing very slow and controlled. Villanova right now is 330th in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a DePaul unit that is currently about 185th, so very mid-tempo with regards to DePaul. And DePaul is a solid team in terms of generating turnovers. They're not quite necessarily like a just juggernaut or anything like that. You've been able to CJ Gunn be able to supply double figures. He throws in there a steal per contest, but it is a DePaul team that has become a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Villanova is in the top 125 themselves, but I do think that DePaul is going to be able to do just enough to be able to hold in there, because they've been able to get quite a bit of facilitation out of lane and blockers. Been able to give you 11 points, 3.8 assists per contest, while turning the ball over less than 2 times per game. With DePaul, they're about a country average team in terms of taking care of the ball. They just need to work on their shooting percentages. They're outside the top 195 in terms of 3-point, 2-point, and free throw shooting percentage, and they're not really grabbing a lot of second chances, but they also have been a top 75 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, which is big because they are not allowing teams to be able to pop it from 3, a bottom 30 opponent's 3-point shot rate, so they are not allowing teams to be able to launch it from 3. And then Caleb Banks has been able to come on strong as well, shooting 43% from 3, about 8 points per contest. Do think that DePaul does just enough to be able to hold in there, and I do think that this is going to be a slog of a game, so I did set my total at a 134.5, at a 135 plus, and on the under, and we'll take the points with DePaul. 7-18, 7-20 on the card. It is Drexel on the road against UNC Wilmington. Wilmington is a 12.5 point favorite. Total on this game 139.5 to 140.5, and with Wilmington, I'm only willing to make them a 10.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Drexel. This is a Drexel squad that's actually playing a little bit faster than they have in past years. Not necessarily a whole heck of a lot faster, though. They're about 328th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a Wilmington team that they've been playing quite slow and controlled as well, but for Wilmington, they have been a top 25 team in terms of being able to dominate the board, so they've been able to do a great job there. In Wilmington, they're actually at 326th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I did set a total here of a 134.5. I'm in on the under, especially with Wilmington being right now number 73 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You've got a Drexel team that's neither here nor there at 169th, as for Drexel, they're a little bit better at generating turnovers than they have been in past years, but where the team really makes their hay is down low. This is a Drexel team that has been a top 100 team with regards to offensive rebound percentage, or a top 100 team with regards to just overall rebounding, as they're doing it as a collective. Only one guy gives you over 5 rebounds per game. William Garcia Edson, he's been able to give you about 6.6 rebounds per game, and then Garfield Turner down for what gives you about 4.8 rebounds per game. Same for Shane Blakeney, and Blakeney is a top scorer, 3 assists, steal and a half, 13 points per contest, shooting 36% from 3 points. So like what he's been able to bring to the table, but on the flip side, you do have a Wilmington team that they've been able to do a nice job in terms of just mixing and matching in general. Nolan Hodge, one of the main returners from a season ago, he's been able to supply 16.5 points per game for a Wilmington team that has been a top 100 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage at 36%. They do an amazing job being a top 20 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Big thanks to Patrick Wessler, who comes over from Virginia Tech, 12 points, 8.5 rebounds per game as a true 7-footer, and then Madison Durr, who comes in from within the conference, 3 assists, 12 points per contest for a Wilmington team that does a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball. Top 125 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're also a team as well outside the top 250 in terms of generating turnovers as well. So while they don't necessarily have a lot of turnovers themselves on offense, they don't necessarily generate a lot of them on defense either. But that said, this is a Wilmington team then with a lot of mixing and matching. I do think that they're going to be able to find a way to get the job done, but it is a Wilmington team that in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're only clocking in 69th in the country. And I do think that with this being just such a slow and controlled game, and with the way that Drexel is able to do a nice job on the boards, that allows them to be able to hold in this game, in a game that it's not going to feature a lot of turnovers, but just a lot of slow and, shall we say, somewhat efficient offense. Semi-total 134.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take anything of 11 plus here with Drexel. 721, 722 on the card. St. John's is going to be on the road facing off against Georgetown, and Georgetown does find themselves as a home underdog of 9.5 points. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total line. So St. John's is a 10-point favorite. 9.5 is the absolute max, so I'm going to be willing to lay with them, but I'm going to be willing to lay. St. John's is very much looking to push up tempo. They're a top 35 team in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Georgetown team that, to their credit, they are leading the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. So they're taking care of the ball. They become a very mid-tempo team, about 177th in terms of total possessions per game. Should have had Cooley back after he was out for throwing the water bottle at the poor child. But that's it for St. John's. Just a really good collective right now, as you've got 6 different guys that give you between 13.9 and 9.3 points per game. So great balance there. Zuby Ejiofor has been the main rebounder with 7.2 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest. And Bryce Hopkins is showing that versatility that he had over at Providence a few seasons ago. 14 points, 4.5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. And then you've got 2 40+% three-point shooters in Jusan Sanan and Mosiah Sellers, who both give you about 10.5 points per contest, with Sellers also being able to throw in there about 2.2 assists per game as well. St. John's doing a solid job in terms of generating turnovers, top 60 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, interestingly, St. John's has been allowing quite a few second and third chances, but on the flip side for Georgetown, with the Vincent Iwuchukwu injury, they've been having a little bit of a tough time being able to execute with that regard. So even though St. John's is giving up a lot of those second and third chances, I don't know if they're going to be able to execute. St. John's now 216th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and to the credit of Georgetown, they're about 116th, but not a lot of outside shooting for this Georgetown team. They're outside the top 310 with that regard. You've had Malik Mack, the Mack attack, shoot 33% for 3, 14.5 points per game, and KJ Lewis, a little bit of a do-it-all player, 14.5 points, 2.2 steals, 6 rebounds per contest, like what I'm seeing there. And Julius Halafana has stepped up in a big way with the Iwuchukwu injury, 5 boards, about 12.5 points per game, but if you look at what he's been able to do recently, he has put up at least 14 points in each out of the last 5 games. He's had 6+ rebounds in 3 out of the last 4, so I've been highly impressed by what he's been able to do. But that said, this is still a team that's dealing with Deshaun Harris-Smith stepping away from the team, even though he wasn't necessarily doing a whole heck of a lot. They're right now dealing with some depth issues with the Iwuchukwu injury. Isaiah Abraham, he's been able to give you about 6.5 points per game, and he actually shoots 39.5% from 3. That is by far the best mark on the team. But I do think that St. John's going to do a nice job generating some turnovers. I do think that for this Georgetown team, they're going to be feeling the effects of having so many guys being out, and I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be up and down, but it's going to involve a lot of sloppiness with regards to the turnovers. But that said, I do think that Georgetown sees a little bit of positivity with that 3-point shooting. I did set my total at a 154, so you're at the 152.5, 153.5. I like the overhand with St. John's willing to lay up to 9.5 with them. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game, 7:23, 7:24. Buffalo is on the road against Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois, a home underdog of 6.5 points with a total of 153, and as that Buffalo is a 4.5 point favorite, I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, Buffalo has been highly efficient in terms of their offense. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, this is a unit that comes in at number 48 in all of college basketball while playing very slowly. 338th in terms of total possessions per game. Northern Illinois is about 214th in terms of total possessions per game, and Northern Illinois has had a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball, but they do go up against a Buffalo team that hasn't necessarily been like overly supreme in terms of generating turnovers. This is a Buffalo team that has really been able to do a nice job in terms of locking it down from 3-point range. So 28th in the country in terms of road 3-point shooting percentage defense, with teams shooting 28.5% against them. You've got a Northern Illinois team that's either here nor there with their 3-point shooting at 32.8%. They've been looking to be able to get the ball a little bit more down low to the likes of Malachi Valentine and Dylan Ducommun, who have been able to both give you 12.5 points per contest. Ducommun dealt with injury towards the beginning part of the season, but he's been able to come in and give the team double figures in each of the last 4 games. Jayo Atuka is a guy that's a little bit more of a 3-point shooting specialist, shoots 37% for 3, 8.5 points per game. And for this Northern Illinois team, they've been able to do a relatively okay job in terms of generating turnovers, country average team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And if there's one thing that the Northern Illinois defense has done an okay job of, it's being able to guard the 3-point line, as they are well outside the top 300 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. They are well outside the top 300 opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they've done a pretty solid job in terms of locking down from 3-point range. Northern Illinois line teams to shoot about 34% from 3-point range, so that's about country average. And then on the flip side for Buffalo, you've had Noah Batchelor do a really nice job in terms of giving the team versatility. He began his career over at Maryland, and he has stepped in at about 6'6", 6'7", with about 7 points, 4.5 boards. He's shooting over 43% from 3-point range. And then your main 2 scorers, Ryan Sable and Daniel Freitag, they combine for 36.5 points per game. They both shoot over 40% from 3-point range. It's a Buffalo team that has done a nice job taking care of the ball. Top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Not going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but where the team can be hurt is inside. They're outside the top 250 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, with Buffalo not really forcing the issue in terms of turnovers. I do think that allows Northern Illinois to hold in there, and I think that this is just going to be a little bit of a slog of a game, and it's going to be a little bit of a weird one as well, because this was supposed to be played on Tuesday, but got pushed back today due to bad weather. So set my line at 4.5. I'm going to take the points with Northern Illinois, and I do like the under. I set my total at 146.5, and now we hit the X games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306, 631, 306, 632. East Texas A&M is playing us to Lamar, and Lamar does find themselves as a road favorite of 2.5 points. 143.5 is the total, and so Lamar is a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. You have an East Texas A&M team that's looking to push a little bit of tempo, not necessarily playing like super duper up tempo, but 111th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, Lamar is about 252nd in the country with that regard, and East Texas A&M just not giving themselves any sort of second and third chances outside the top three in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound and just getting blasted from 3-point range. 352nd in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Now that goes down to 32% at home, but 39% overall for the year. Lamar's had a tough time with their 3-point shooting percentage defense as well. That goes down to 33% in a roadside court venue, and I like the overall versatility that you've got for Lamar. You've got a 6'10" big man in Andrew Holyfield who's able to give you 13 points, 5.5 boards. He's been able to shoot about 32% from 3-point range. Cody Benbaker has been able to shoot 40% from 3. He supplies the team with 9 points per game, though this is a Lamar unit that has been very suspect with regards to their 3-point shooting defense. They have been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and you just don't have as much down low with East Texas A&M. Now, for East Texas A&M, this has actually been a much improved 3-point shooting team. Last year, they were one of the most dreadful teams from the outside in all of college basketball. They bring in the Charleston State transfer, Rodney Harrison, 14 points. He shoots about 32.5% from 3-point range, and then you've got two guys that shoot over 41% to be able to support them in Damian Garcia and Vinny Singana, who have been able to combine for about 20 points per game, but just not a lot of rebounding for the team for one. And in a nip and tuck spot, this is also a bunch in East Texas A&M that is about 290th with their free throw shooting percentage at 67.9%. They've been outside the top 200 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, to the credit of East Texas A&M, top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but Lamar is able to match that ability to be able to generate turnovers. Lamar, they themselves shoot 67.5% the free throw line, that's hovering right around 300, so both of these seem to leave a little bit of something to be desired there, and that's a big reason why I did have to set my total more around a 142, so I'm going to be in on the under, but for Lamar, I do think that they're going to do a nice job in terms of grabbing some second and third chances, top 150 team with regards to offensive rebound percentage. I think that they win from within in this case, so set Lamar as a 4-point favorite, willing to lay with Lamar, and I'm going to be in on the under. It's 306, 633, 306, 634. You've got Lehigh playing us Army, and Army finds themselves as an underdog, 4.5 points, 143.5 is the total, set my line at 5.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Lehigh. Army is a team that's just looking to go bombs away from 3-point range. Over 52% of their shots come from 3-point range. That's a top 5 mark in terms of 3-point shot rate in all of college basketball. And Army, a mid-tempo team, about 164th in terms of total possessions per game. Lehigh a little bit slower at about 236th, and Lehigh's not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances. They're well outside the top 300 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. They're outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but Army just doesn't really have a lot of size, and they've been getting absolutely dump trucked on the glass as well. This is an Army team that has been having Ryan Curry just do it all, 13.5 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. You don't have a single guy in the roster who gives you over 5 rebounds per game. It's Tate Lazowski. His approximate 5 rebounds per game is right now leading the way, and though Army takes so many threes, they're outside the top 200 with regards to their own 3-point shooting percentage. To their credit, teams are only shooting about 31% for 3 against them, but they're getting plowed inside outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Lehigh, that means that 6'9" Hank Alvey should be able to have himself a day. He's been able to give the team 7 boards, 11.5 points per game. He, on like a half a 3 per game, shoots 42% for 3, very small sample size. But for Lehigh, you've also had Andrew Ugasevich, who he missed the first 2 games of the season. He and Josh Wingram combined for 21 points per game. They combined to shoot about 36% from 3, and Nasir Whitlock has been that main scorer with about 19.5 points per game. It's a Lehigh team that has become a top 200 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so that what they lack with regards to rebounding, they make up for there, and they pile drive teams inside. Army is looking to take a lot of threes. Lehigh, a top 20 team in terms of inducing shots from inside the 3-point line. I think that that's going to throw Army for a little bit of loop and allow Lehigh to be able to get the job done. I did set my total at a 139.5. I just don't think that Army is going to be able to get off a lot of 3-point shots, and do think that this is going to be a control game, so in on the under, and I'm going to lay up to 5 here with Lehigh. 306, 635, 306, 636. American is playing us to Loyola Maryland. Loyola Maryland is a underdog of 8.5 to 9.5 points. 155.5 is the total. I set a total of 147.5. I'm in on the under. Now for American, they have really cranked up their tempo. Last 2 years, they were a bottom 20 team in terms of total possessions per game. They're now about 200th, but we have seen in the last 5 games, they were playing at a rate of about 5 possessions per game fewer, and got a Loyola Loyola Maryland team that's very mid-tempo, about 182nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I think that Loyola Maryland holds in there, set them as a 7.5-point underdog. Now you've got an American team that's a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Loyola Maryland 12.8 turnovers per game outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, but also have a Loyola Maryland team that's been able to do a pretty solid job on the glass. They're a top 190 team with regards to overall rebound percentage, with Jacob Theodusu leading the way, 15 points, 4.5 boards, 2 steals per contest. He only shoots 24% from three-point range, but Troy Cicero Jr. has been now shooting 44% from the outside, 5.5 points per game. He's been a little bit of an off-the-bench dynamo for three. You've had a few injuries with Emmett Adir, along Jonas Sataris deal with a little bit of injury, but Adir, even though he dealt with a little bit of injury in November, he should be good to go in this game, 9+ points in 4 out of the last 5 games, so he's been able to do a rock-solid job coming off of injury. And then for American, it's been a lot of mixing and matching with losing Mark Rogers from a season ago. They've been really hoping that Matt Mayock would be able to take the mantle, and he's only been able to give the team about 8.5 points per game. For American, country average team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 34.5%, and for American, they are just not doing a great job on the glass right now outside the top 225 in terms of rebound percentage. As the lone guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game is Julian Ataribe, who's been able to give you 5 boards, 8.5 points per game, and does shoot 36% for 3. And Wyatt Nadesis has been able to shoot about 40% for 3, throws in their 10.5 points per game. But your top 2 scorers, Greg Jones, Madden Collins, they both shoot less than 23% for 3, combined for about 24 points per game. Between the two of them, they do generate about 3.3 steals per game, so I do think that things get a little bit soft here, but with American being outside the top 260 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, that should allow Loyola Maryland to hold in there. Won't take the points with Loyola Maryland, set them as a underdog of 7.5 points, and I'm in on the under as well, 306-637, 306-638. You've got Boston U, and they're on the road against Navy, and Navy does find themselves as a good-sized favorite here of 4.5 to 5.5 points, so on game 137.5, and did set a total of a 140.5. I'm in on the over. Now you've got two teams that are not looking to push tempo whatsoever. Boston U 355th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Navy is 307th, but this is a defense for Boston U that is really taking a turn for the worse. For Boston U, 328th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Navy's been respectable. Navy more around about 91st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Big reason why I did have to set them here as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay in, and Navy should be able to dominate down low, as you've got a pair of guys that have been able to do a great job on the glass, with having Don Draper give you about 8 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists per game. Great versatility at 6'5", and then Aiden Koa, more around 6'9", 6'10". He's more of your true rim protector. A block, 9.5 rebounds, 12.5 points per game. And then for Navy, they shoot about 33.5% for 3. Austin Benjini has shot 50% for 3 with 16.5 points per game. And last year, Jin Woo Kim shot over 40% for 3, down to about 34.9% this season. But for this Navy team, they're looking to pile drive the ball a little bit more inside. And for Navy, a big reason why the defense has been so strong is that they have guarded the 3-point line as well. They are allowing teams to shoot 30.3% for 3. Top 1 mark in all of college basketball. And this is a Boston U team that's in the top 75 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3. Boston U shoots 38.5% from the outside. That's a top 35 mark in all of college basketball, with Michael Air McNair leading the way, shooting 50% for 3, 15.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. And then you've been able to have a few other guys in Malcolm Chamaisi along with Ben Defty combined for about 12 rebounds per game. Chamaisi dealt with a little bit of injury, but he's back in the fold for the team. But for this Boston U team, the lack of defensive efficiency is just very much there for them. They don't generate any sort of turnovers whatsoever outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And with this Navy team being as good as they are down low, I do think that they get the job done in convincing fashion. So I'm outlining an 8.5, 1 to lay with Navy, and I do like the over, so my total 140.5. You've got 306-639, 306-640. Bucknell on the road against Holy Cross. Holy Cross finds themselves as a small favorite here of 1.5 points in some spots. Other spots are now showing Bucknell as a favorite of a point as well. So it depends upon your book as to which team is favorite. 137.5 to 138.5 is the total. And I said Holy Cross is a 5-point favorite. So whether that be laying a point or taking them as a money line underdog, I'm going to be in on Holy Cross. As for Holy Cross, 3-point shooting has fallen off way a big time from last season. Last year, top 15 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. Outside the top 3 in this season, I think that there's a little bit of positivity due in, and you do have your top 3 scorers for Holy Cross all shooting at least 34.9% for 3. Tyler Boston with 13 points on 36.5% 3-point shooting, a steal and 3.2 assists per game. Joe Nugent, 4 boards, 11.5 points at 6'6", shoots 35.9% for 3. And Gabe Warren, 37% 3-point shooter. So these guys have all been rock solid. And for Holy Cross, they've been a little bit better defensively. Both of these teams are leaving a whole heck of a lot of something to be desired there, though, as Holy Cross right now 323rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Bucknell is right now 301st. And for Bucknell, they losing Williamson from a season ago, so it's been up to the German freshman in Amar Doris to really be able to hold things down low. 12.5 points, 4 boards. At 6'10", he's able to pop it from 3, but only had about a clip of 21% from the outside. Bucknell's just been super sloppy with the ball. Outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, they're outside the top 290 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, and they're allowing teams to shoot 40% from 3-point range. Bottom 10 team in all of college basketball there. Bottom 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, their own 2-point shooting percentage. It's outside the top 335, so you've got two teams that are not really looking to push tempo whatsoever, with Bucknell 291st in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Holy Cross team that's 342nd, but the overall lack of efficiency on defense, I think, is going to be able to get you to the over, and I think that Holy Cross just does a good job in terms of finding that 3-point shooting that they had from a season ago with their top guys being able to lead the way. I said Holy Cross is a 5-point favorite. I like the over, and I like Holy Cross on the money line as an underdog. 3-6-641, 3-6-642. UNC Asheville is going to be playing us to High Point, and High Point hopes to not be a low point as a 10.5 point road favorite. So on this game, it is 154.5, and I said High Point as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. You've got a High Point team that in the last few seasons, they weren't really a super up-tempo team. They pushed it a little bit more this year, 126th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and then you have a UNC Asheville team that's actually really slowed it down. They're down to about 245th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. For Asheville, 242nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and at home, that's been even worse than that. Meanwhile, High Point is actually doing a solid job defensively, thanks to being able to generate some turnovers here into the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a UNC Asheville team that very much is going to be looking to launch from 3-point range. Top 100 team with that regard, with Justin Wright being Mr. Wright, shooting 47% for 3, 17 points, 2.5 assists per game. Cameron Taylor has been a little bit of do-it-all dynamo, 3.5 assists, 6 rebounds, 15.5 points per game, and then Toya Solomon is the big man that gives you about 7 rebounds per game. But for this UNC Asheville team, they've really been getting tattooed on the glass this year. They are a team that's outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they just don't force the issue whatsoever. For Asheville, outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of generating turnovers, and for High Point, they're becoming a top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, top 20 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and High Point, a top 20 team in terms of points per possession. You've got 3 guys that give you at least 11.5 points per game. Conrad Martinez, 11.5 points on 40% 3-point shooting. Terry Anderson shoots 45.5% from 3 with 13 points per game. Cameron Fletcher began his career over at Florida State. Xavier, 17 points, 8 boards. And then Rob Martin comes over from Southeast Missouri State, 38.5% 3-point shooter, 14 points. All 4 of these guys, by the way, give you at least a steal per contest as well. And incredibly, out of your top 9 scores, every one of them for this High Point team is giving you at least 0.8 steals per game. So they've been able to do a great job by committee with that regard. I do think that High Point, too well-rounded in this game. They're a top 20 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, but I do think that for UNC Asheville, they do just enough to be able to hold in there with their overall 3-point shooting, the way that they've been able to play along the perimeter, and I do think that for this High Point team, it's been about country average in terms of allowing opponents to be able to bomb from 3-point range. That does help you out with regards to semi-total at a 159.5, so I'm going to be in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the double figures here with Asheville, set them as a 7.5 point underdog. 306-643, 306-644. Charleston Southern is going to be playing on the road against Gardner Webb, and Gardner Webb, a sizable home underdog here of 10.5 points, 161.5 is the total, and I don't think that they're a big enough home underdog. I set my line at 15.5. I'm going to be willing to lay. Have a Charleston Southern team that's very much looking to push tempo. They're 51st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Gardner Webb has pushed a bit of tempo as well. I'm not quite sure why. They're now 98th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Gardner Webb 361st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and against the D1 teams that they have played, all but one of them has reached at least 84 points, with the lone exception being Southeast Louisiana, who's outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And for Charleston Southern, you got Bryson Blaine, who's just blazing it up, 18.5 points, shoots 38.5% from 3. Jesse Hefemeister, along with Alan Sumler, they combine to shoot about 40.5% from 3, 26 points per game between the two of them. Luke Williams, 5.5 assists. He's able to give the team 10 points per game. Now, one thing that Charleston Southern is not going to do is generate turnovers. They're a bottom 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. That helps out a Gardner Webb team that, as well, has not really been that great in terms of being able to execute offensively. They're well outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, outside the top 280 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, as Jacob Hogarth, Spencer Sims, along with Jacob Hudson, all give between 10 and 11 points per game. And you do have Sims actually shooting 47 37.5% from three-point range, but no help around these guys. They don't do anything in terms of giving themselves second chances outside the top 310 in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound outside the top 275 in terms of ball security. And when you're outside the top 330 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage and you're getting plowed on the glass, it's just not great to say the least. Heck, Gardner-Webb lost to non-Division I North Greenville earlier this year. I think that Charleston Southern just absolutely takes it to them in this spot. I said my total at 159.5. I just don't know if Gardner-Webb does her part with this total. As Charleston Southern actually a top 115 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, even though they don't generate turnovers. Top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. So I do like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Charleston Southern. 306-645, 306-646. You've got Radford on the road against USC Upstate. Upstate is a home underdog of 1.5 points. 159.5 is the total, and I say USC Upstate as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. With this Radford team, I just haven't overall been that impressed by them. With Radford, they are very much cranking up their tempo now. In terms of total possessions per game, they're up to about 22nd in all of college basketball, but have an Upstate team that has been much improved with their defense, and they've dialed it back from a season ago. About 156 in terms of total possessions per game. They're up to about 152nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Radford is just 245th. And for Radford, they do have a really nice go-to scorer. Comes in from the ACC, and Dennis Parker, who began his career over at NC State, 19.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 43% from three-point range, but that's a little bit warped by the fact that he had the 53 spot against a Coppin State team that's just absolutely terrible. Now, he did follow that up with 26 points against William & Mary, so credit to him there. But Del Jones, who comes over from Clemson, 14.5 points. He only shoots about 31% from three. In Radford, a neither here nor there team from three-point range at 34.1%. They've been solid in terms of generating turnovers. Top 110 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis, but they leave themselves very vulnerable from the outside. Teams are shooting over 36% from three-point range against them, and then you've got an Upstate team that has Carmel Atkins, who's been able to give you double figures. He's shooting darn near 40% from three. It's an Upstate team that leaves something to be desired with their three-point shooting, 245th in all of college basketball in that regard. And for Radford, while they shoot 38.4% from three-point range at home, when they hit the road, that goes on to 26.9%. And I think that that's going to be a little bit of an issue for them. And with this Upstate team, even though they don't necessarily have that one guy that's going to give you a supreme amount of rebounding or anything like that, they do a nice job by committee, as you right now have, I believe, 5 different guys give you over 4 rebounds per game. Colin Collier has been able to give you only about 2.5 points, but throws in their 4 boards per contest. Tyler Smith, 4 boards. He's been helped by Lyric Davis and Jeffrith Martinez, who both give you 5.4 rebounds per game. And Martinez, 1.8 blocks per game. And then with Atkins, he's been able to give you about 5 boards. He's been a nice three-point shooter. And then Isaiah Skinner, he, in his limited minutes, he's been able to shoot 44% from three-point range, do a nice job as an off-the-bench scorer for the team, for an Upstate team that's currently in the top 125 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not necessarily the greatest teams on the boards, but I do think that Upstate gets the job done against a Radford team that's been very shaky with that outside defense. And as a result, I did set my total here at a 155.5. I do think that with Radford, they see a dip with their three-point shooting, so in on the under, and I'm willing to lay with Upstate. 306-647, 306-648. You've got the Quakers of Penn, and they are going to be playing us to NJIT. NJIT is a 15.5 point underdog. 148.5 to 149.5 is the total. Did set a total of 151.5. I'm going to be in on the over. Now for NJIT, well outside the top 335 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but leaving a lot to be desired defensively as well. And NJIT has become a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, about 188th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And with Penn, they're right there as well, 181st in terms of total possessions per game. But Penn, they are 16th in the country with their 39.2% three-point shooting. And for this Penn team, they bring in TJ Power, a former top 25 recruit that couldn't get out there over at Duke in Virginia. He's been supplying the team with about 14.5 points, 7.5 boards from three-point range. He is shooting 39.5% from three-point range. Michael Zanoni, he's been able to step up with the injury to Ethan Roberts with about 11.5 points. He's out shooting 40% from three-point range. And for Roberts, we haven't seen him in darn near like 3 or 4 weeks, so I'm thinking he's going to be out once again. But even without him, they should be able to get by an NJIT team that was dealing with an injury earlier in the season to their top returning scorer, it's Sebastian Robinson. But I mean, with Robinson, he just still hasn't found his sea legs this year. 10 points per game on less than 22% three-point shooting for this entire team. They shoot 30.5% from three-point range outside the top 3 internationally. They're just getting plowed on the glass as well outside the top 3 with this regard. Even with having Malachi Arrington giving you about 5.3 points, 5.4 boards, and a block per contest. And then Ari Fulton has been able to supply about 6.5 rebounds per game as well. This team just leaves a lot to be desired there outside the top tier in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage as well. Not really forcing the issue in terms of generating turnovers. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Penn is like some sort of amazing defensive team as well. If you look at points allowed on a per possession basis, it's a Penn team that right now is clocking in about 257th in all of college basketball, but NJIT has been even worse. Right now, they are checking in more in that neighborhood of about 270th, and I do think that with this Penn team, they do find a way to persevere, get the job done, and put up quite a few points on a lackluster NJIT team. So I set my line at 17.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and do like this total over as well. So my total 151.5, 306-649, 306-650. You've got Colgate on the road against Lafayette, and Lafayette finds themselves as a home underdog of 6.5 to 5.5 points, 147.5 is the total, and I said Colgate as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Lafayette. They just really have a lot of holes all across the boulevard. With Lafayette last year, they had Justin Vanderbond doing a nice job down low, and not having him anymore, that has really hurt them. And you've got two relatively slow and controlled teams with Lafayette 271st in terms of total possessions per game. Colgate is about 232nd, and with this Colgate team, they're not going to grab any sort of second and third chances outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. But you've got Jalen Cox doing it all. 5 boards, 5.5 assists, 2 steals on 16 points per game at 43% three-point shooting. Kyle Cardlissimo is now up to about 41% three-point shooting. And Colgate, a top 125 team once again with their three-point shooting percentage. Top 200 team with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now where they're really getting hurt is on the glass, as they're outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and that has led them to being about 274th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But you've got a Lafayette team that's 315th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for this Lafayette team, they're really running their offense through their main two scorers, as they've been able to get tons of production out of Caleb Williams with about 17 points. He throws in their 3 assists, shooting 39.5% from 3. And then Andrew Phillips has been able to give you 15 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 37.5% from 3. To the cry of Christian Humphrey Rembert, he's now shooting 43.5% from 3, 8.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. So for Lafayette, they've got a few guys that are able to hit the boards, but they're still outside the top 250 with their own rebound percentage. And for Lafayette, they're just not executing down low. They are outside the top 340 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. For Lafayette, they're doing an okay job in terms of taking care of the ball, about country average in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. But even though you've got two teams that are, shall we say, rather suspect with regards to their defense, you've got one team that's just so much better on offense, with Lafayette right now only about 250th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And I do think that allows Colgate to be able to find a way to get the job done. I did set my total here at a 143.5. I just don't think that Lafayette does their part with this total. So one lay up to 7 with Colgate, and I'm going to be in on the under. 306, 651, 306, 652. Longwood plays those to Winthrop. Winthrop is an 8.5 point road favorite. Total on this game is 164.5, and I said Winthrop as an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. This is a Longwood team that just has had a really tough time in terms of executing on offense. With Longwood, it's a little bit of an up-tempo team, about 118th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Winthrop is 79th. And with Winthrop, I recognize that they had that less than savory performance against Texas Tech where they didn't show up in the first half, but even with that, they're still 74th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Longwood is currently 239th, and right now what has just been ailing Longwood is the fact that they just have not been able to find any sort of three-point shooting whatsoever. This is a Longwood team that right now is shooting from three-point range in that neighborhood about 26.7%. That goes down to 25% at home. That is a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball. While Winthrop, they shoot about 34% away from home from three-point range overall, about 35% from the outside, and the missing link was really Kareem Rozier, who comes over from Duquesne, and he has been very good in terms of leading this offense. 4 assists, 13 points per game. He shoots about 39.5% from three-point range. And then Logan Duncombe has been very nice down low. 15.5 points, 7.5 boards, a former top 125 recruit of Indiana. Cody Cluett, Dalen Berry, they've been able to combine for about 24 points per contest for a team in Winthrop that has been able to do a really good job in terms of generating second and third chances for themselves as well. This is a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And this is a Longwood team that has been able to give themselves a decent amount of second and third chances as well. But for Longwood, they're also giving up quite quite a few second and third chances as well. In terms of defensive rebound percentage at home, they're allowing teams to grab about 30.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's outside the top 175 nationally when you just look at home defensive rebound percentage. And with this Longwood team, they just really need to find that spark plug in terms of being able to pop it from three-point range. And I do like the game of Jacoy Hutchinson. He comes over from George Washington. He's been the main scorer, 3.3 assists, 12.5 points per game, but he shoots 25% from three-point range. As a matter of fact, you've got two guys on the roster right now that shoot above 30% from three. Elijah Jones with about 5.8 points per game. He shoots 36% from three, but he's been dealing with injury. And then Reed Thompson, he's been able to shoot 35.5% from three-point range, about 10 points per game out of him. It is a Longwood team that, to their credit, they're a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've also been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well, but I do think that Longwood is just going to be overwhelmed by what Duncombe is able to do down low, and the lack of three-point shooting, I think, is going to be very costly to them in this spot, and costly to the total as well. So my total 163.5, so you're at the 164.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 11 here with points up through a 6.653, through a 6.654. You've got Northwestern State playing us to Stephen F. Austin, and Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, an 8.5 point road favorite. Total on this game, you're going to be getting it at a 139.5. I did set Stephen F. Austin as a favorite of only 5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Northwestern State. Northwestern State overall for the season outside the top 300 with regards to their overall rebound percentage, but much of this was without Willie Williams, and ever since they've gotten him back, they have been much better down low. As for Williams, he's only been able to play in 6 games this year, and he's not too much of a scorer, only about 4.3 points per game, but he throws in there 6.5 rebounds per game, and he is the only guy in the roster that gives you over 4 boards per contest. J.C. Riley has been one of your top other rebounders, but he's been missing for 5 games as well, so they've been looking to Derek Turner to be able to give you a little bit more down low, 4.5 points, 4 boards, but this has been a team that's been good with their three-point shooting. Izzy Miles, who comes over from Charleston State, 52% three-point shooter with 10 points per contest. Mike Thomas, he shoots 42% for three, 16 points, 2.5 assists per game, and then Justin Redmond has been able to give you 10.5 points per game. This is big for a Northwestern State team that has been a little bit lackadaisical on defense, and you've got a Stephen F. Austin team that has been not generating as many turnovers as they have in past seasons. For Stephen F. Austin, this used to be a team that was like in the top 10 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now they become more of a rebounding team. They're a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and even with not generating the turnovers, they still have been a very good team on the defensive side of things. They're actually 29th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. With Stephen F. Austin, they're a still relatively slow team, 261st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Northwestern State team that's not really looking to push the issue either, 281st in the country, but for Stephen F. Austin, they're a little bit of an improved outside shooting team with the Lumberjacks. You've been able to have Keon Thompson come back from season ago. He has been able to do a tremendous job with 17.5 points per game, shoots 35.5% from three-point range, and Lateef Patrick Jr., it's about 16 points. He shoots 32.5% from three with Narad Kadajovic. Hopefully I said that correct. 12.5 points, 49% three-point shooter for a Stephen F. Austin team that now shoots 38% from the outside, and they've been a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And while Stephen F. Austin is not generating the turnovers that they have in the past, they're still dominating the turnover battle because they're a top 30 team in terms of taking care of the ball. But I do think that for Northwestern State, having Williams back in the fold, and with this Stephen F. Austin team being terrible at the free throw line, they are a bottom 10 team in the country, shooting 62% of the free throw line. That allows Northwestern State to be able to in there, and I do think that they're going to find some cracks in the Stephen F. Austin defense that's no longer generating turnovers. So set my line at 5, we'll take the points with Northwestern State, and I do like the over as well, through a 6.655, through a 6.656. Texas A&M Corpus Christi plays us to New Orleans. New Orleans is an underdog, 4.5 points total on this game. It is 145.5. Set my line at 1.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with New Orleans. This is a New Orleans team that has quite a bit down low with having MJ Thomas back from a season ago, about 7.8 boards, 10.5 points per game. They do need to do a better job on the turnover front. They're outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, outside the top 320 in terms of taking care of the ball. But Jakevion Buckley, along with Colson Benson, these two guys have been very good. They've been able to combine for about 28.5 points per game. Benson shoots 36.5% for three and 91% of the free throw line. Buckley, 38.5% three-point shooter with 2 steals, 5 assists per contest. And then you've got down low Churchill Abus, who saw very meaningful minutes over at Wake Forest and DePaul in recent years. He's been able to give you about 5 boards, block and a half per contest. And then Pagonis has been able to give you about 6.5 points per game. He throws in there a pair of assists per game as well. And then on the flip side of things, you've got a Texas A&M Corpus Christi team that just has been very up, down, and all around with regards to their styles over the last few seasons. And for Corpus Christi right now, they're placing their faith in the backcourt in Nicholas Shamboyo, who missed the first 4 games of the season but comes in from Denver, shoots 41.5% from 3, 12 points, 2.5 assists per game. It is a Corpus Christi team that is still very solid in terms of generating turnovers. Top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You've got a New Orleans team that's very much going to be looking to push tempo in this game. They're a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a Corpus Christi team that they're more around about 231st, so they've been looking to slow things down a little bit more. And for this Corpus Christi team, they're not necessarily like a supreme defense, but they've been able to do a solid job defensively at about 182nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But very interestingly, they're giving up about 13.4 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. So that throws a little bit of a monkey wrench into things. Now, I did still set my total at a 143.5 because I do think that there's going to be sloppiness on both sides. Corpus Christi also outside the top 270 in terms of taking care of the ball. You've been able to have Sheldon Williams down low be able to give you about 7 boards, 11.5 points per game. And then Franek Yetna has been a very versatile piece, being able to give you 7.5 points, a little bit over a seal, 4.5 rebounds per game as well. But I think that New Orleans, with having all that they've got down low, that's going to allow them to hold in there in a game that I think is going to be slowed down a little bit more by Corpus Christi. So my total at a 143.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with New Orleans, and I do like the under end. Wrap things up with 306, 557, 306, 658. You've got UT Rio Grande Valley playing us at Nichols. Nichols is a underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points. 146.5 to 147.5 is the total. I set Grand Valley as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with this Vaqueros team. They've been able to do a pretty rock solid job in terms of getting their backcourt going and just doing a better job in terms of taking care of the ball. This has been a Grand Valley team that in recent years they have had always a very difficult time in terms of taking care of the ball, and the defense isn't amazing, but it's respectable at about 179th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Grand Valley, this has also been a team that has been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. They don't grab any sort of offensive rebounds. They are 322nd in all of college basketball with regards to percentage of their missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound. But for Grand Valley, they've been able to find some nice backcourt pieces with having Mr. Always Right. That's a great name. Give you about 3 assists per contest. Corey Cotton, he comes on over from Jacksonville State with about 12 points, 5.5 boards. He shoots 42% from 3, and it's a whole is greater than the sum of its parts collective on the glass for this team, as right now Cotton is the only guy that gives you over 4.8 rebounds per game, but you've got 4 separate guys that have been able to give you at least 3.7 rebounds per game. Marvin McGee, who comes over from Cal State Bakersfield, meet me for the Road Runners, 11.5 points. He shoots 46% from 3, and Grand Valley right now shooting 40.3% from 3, including their non-Division I games. That's a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. I do think that that's going to be tapering off a little bit. They're facing off against a Nichols team that has been very good in terms of generating turnovers themselves. They've been a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Nichols, a very mid-tempo team. They're about 204th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Nichols, it has been a little bit, shall we say, up and down with regards to this defense. And I do think that they're going to do a good job of holding in there. And the offense has improved, but they are still a unit that is outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're going to do nothing in way of being able to give themselves second and third chances. 291st in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. And they're going to be looking very much to Trey English to be able to headline things. He's been their main facilitator with about 11.3 points, 3.6 assists per contest. Doesn't shoot it well from 3, but the other 2 main scorers, Angelic Dunkley along with Jalen Searles, who combined for 26.2 points per game between the two of them. They're shooting about 38.5% from 3-point range, and they also do combine for about 11 rebounds per game as well. But with Nichols, they are outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They very much gamble for turnovers, and that should allow this Grand Valley team to find a way to get the job done. And I do think the Grand Valley is going to cool down a little bit with that 3-point shooting. So semi-total 146.5. So here at the 147. Plus, I'm in on the under and I'm willing to lay with Grand Valley, and that wraps things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, Larsium, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks once again to our good friend Curtis Rogers, who joined me in the last segment, and I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.